Welcome to the Black Swan Diaries, Episode 1. I am Glenn and I'm here with Australian artist, writer, and publisher Phil Day, and we're going to have a civil discourse on Democratic Socialism and probably a slew of other things. So before we get started, I just want to say thank you, Phil, for being the first guest and helping me come up with a name for the new podcast. So thank you, buddy.
No, thanks for having me. It was an honour being the first guest on. Yeah, and I don't know if you want to describe what the Black Swan effect is. I mean, I didn't look it up. It was a long time ago that I encountered that term, but I don't know, you probably had it on your podcast or whatever it is explaining what it is, I guess.
Well, you're the one that introduced me to it, so if you want to...
Yeah. Well, I think it's basically, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but it's essentially European. I think it came out of Europe, but it was European. They knew of white swans, so when people would say something like, like in some sort of conversation or argument, someone might say, "Oh, yeah, that's just like that'll be like the day we see a black swan, like a fictional thing because there's only white swans." But it's sort of an ending point, like a trump card, someone saying, putting forward a proposition and say, "Oh, that'll be the day we see pigs flying," that kind of idea, And like when pigs fly, and then of course when Europeans eventually made their way to Australia, they encountered black swans, because we had black swans here. And so all of a sudden it meant that their foundation of what they thought was reasonable was all of a sudden turned on its head. Not it turned everybody's head, it just showed you that we don't have all the cards in our hand, we're not privy to all the information. And when you said to me what the show was going to be about, it was like talking to various different people to get a better insight of generally their opinions, I guess. Otherwise, why would you have them on? You want their opinions on things that maybe for your own self get a better, more of an understanding of those people and their thoughts, or maybe the topics you're talking about. So it's a bit like that. Like, you live in Europe and you think, well, there's only ever white swans, there's no such thing as black swans, then eventually you cross the equator and you find black swans. And or you think, oh, my world has gotten bigger. I thought I knew everything about swans, but I don't.
Yep.
Basically, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, that's the gist of it. Yeah.
And I'll be the first to tell you I don't know everything. I'm trying to learn as much as I can.
Well, the problem is I find, like you introduced me before, like, as I've got to work with lots of artists and writers and publishing ideas and stuff, the more you know, the more you realise you don't know. And you sort of quoting Socrates, you knew that you knew nothing. Because as you start to dig down in something, even those little things, the knowledge expands out. Very quickly. So if you were to sort of look at the social history of keys, just keys, that you lock doors with, like a very long history, and how they're used. So when you look at something I've looked at, like the social history of book binding or book publishing, it's very detailed, long, it's sort of political, and it gets into sort of, like we were talking once about social capital, it gets into all sorts of funny areas. It really it starts touching on all sorts of things. Little bits of science, of course, to make pigments and make paper, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that the more you know, the realise how much you don't know. And then a simpler way of putting it, remember when you're a kid, you smash a toy like something, like a digital, like an electronic toy, and you open up, and on the outside it's a remote control car, and it's got 4 wheels, and you see how it works, and you open up and it's got all these other gadgets, you have no idea what they're for. It's like taking the back of a television set off. What is all that stuff?
Yep.
You know what the buttons on the front are. There's the on and off button, and there's the dial, the change of the channels. I think that's all you need to know. And there's the power cord. Then you actually look inside and you think, my God, what's going on in here? You don't know about that stuff. So then you realise you thought you knew everything you knew about the TV, which is where the power point was, the on-off switch, and you turn the dial for the station, maybe where the error went in. But that's not everything about TV. That's a very surface quality. It goes a lot deeper than that. That's true of everything. Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. That's one thought on it.
So recently, you posted a video on Democratic Socialism on Facebook, and it had something like 400, 500 comments.
Yeah, well, it was actually on socialism and communism. I think it might have been titled Socialism versus Communism, and it was a YouTube clip, and it was being presented by an American. I'm not sure if it was when I say American, like North America, it might have been Canadian, it might have been some of the US, I'm not sure. And it was just there very short take on the difference between socialism and communism. And the reason I come up with a few people I've spoken to, friends in mostly in the US, and there was different thoughts on what socialism was and how it's the same as communism. And I just thought this is true, and it's not accurate. An accurate description is sort of say the same as if it's not the same. And so I just posted up there, and of course it got attention. And people would, no one had a go at me, so I didn't take it personal. But I said, well, I'm actually not a socialist. I said I was a democratic socialist. And then that became, well, that's the same as socialism. It's not the same as socialism at all. And that there is some connection there, depending on how far you want to take socialism. Just as socialism is connected to communism, it's not the goal. But I'm not a socialist. So that's where. So it ended up getting something like 560 something comments in. Not that that's a big deal, but it just when I ended it, I think I said something like rational behaviour had to prevail, and I just sort of stopped it because it started getting a bit crazy. Like people started being a bit offensive to each other. And I got kind of went this. Anyway, so that's where it began, and that's when you sort of contacted me about talking about it some more. So I'm not sure what you want to ask directly about it.
Well, one thing I noticed in that thread, though, is Australians and Americans have two completely different viewpoints on democratic socialism. It seemed like to me, like everyone in that thread that was American agreed, no, this is bad, and then the Australians was all like, no, we actually have this as a system, and it's a pretty good system. And that's why I reached out to you, because I was like, okay, well, I want to learn more about how it's implemented in Australia, like with your healthcare and everything like that.
Oh, yeah. Well, depends on the definition of democratic socialism as well. Like, it's not for a social democracy. The problem is that, in truth, Australia's not I don't think it's clearly. I wouldn't say it's actually a democratic socialist country anyway, because it's about. So when you look at a socialist perspective, it's the idea that it's the nationalisation of private industry that comes under government ownership, and then that's socialism. We understand that. So democratic socialists often want parts of things to be like certain amounts of certain entities to be nationalised in that way. But my view on democratic socialism is more attached to an egalitarian view of how revenue raised through taxes is spent. Now, that's not strictly democratic socialism, but you'll find that there are some socialists who don't like democratic socialism because of when you get a behaviour in a country like when you get a financial crash in 2006, 2007?
2008.
2008. So when that occurred, the government stepped in and sort of gave a lot of money to stimulate the economy. It sort of swept in and sort of, helped the banks and all that sort of stuff. And the socialists would say that's actually wrong because it's they'd rather see the whole system fail. They'd want to see how capitalism's not working, because in that case it did fail. It didn't in the purest sense. If an economy is just a jungle, they're just the big eat the small and all that sort of stuff. Like then it failed, and then the government stepped in to sort of secure that. And I don't agree with the socialist mindset. I don't see them gain by watching the system fail in that matter. Some may, but I'm not anti-capitalist at all. I think capitalism and there's aspects of capitalism they do much better than the government could do. A lot of entrepreneurial and enterprise is just not going to come out of government funding because it doesn't have that type of imagination. It has other types of imagination that it does very well. There's certain things it's just not going to even think about doing. It's not in their interest to do it.
Yep.
They're not going to say we need a device that can store music. The government is going to sort of try and do Spotify. You know what I mean? It's just isn't going to happen. I can't see why. There'd just be too many departments. It's not what it's about. So for me, it's about looking after, like I said before, like the basic needs and how you define those basic needs in a society. So making sure that those things are met by the government, and remembering that if we have this shared view that the government is an entity created by the people, and the people, that the government don't rule. We rule the government in the end. We vote them in, and they have to. And if they're of no use to actually securing who we are, then what function do they have?
Yep.
So I'll probably misquote like one of your presidents, like Kennedy, when he said, what is it? You don't ask what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Well, I don't agree with that. It really is about what's the government going to do for me. If we see the idea of country, I don't know if you mean country by government or in a broader sense. But if you said, don't ask the government what it can do for you, ask what you can do for the government. No way. Like the point of the government is public servants if they're serving us, the public. Otherwise, what's the good of them?
Yep.
What's the function of it? So that's my basic premise of what I would see as a democratic socialist interest. Now, the examples of that you'll find in various countries, European countries, and it depends on how much you want to see it as democratic socialism. So something like you're saying, like Medicare, should that be fully privatised? In Australia, it's not. You get a Medicare card as a citizen. The various benefits come with that. But one of the benefits that doesn't come with it is dental care. It's not covered under Medicare. Whereas in France, it is covered. So you can argue case they have a more extended, a more complete form of, we can call it democratic socialism in this case, than Australia do. So it's not a binary thing where you switch it on and off. It's just how far it extends into areas. So you wouldn't want it in every area. You don't need it in every area. But for me, it's addressing again that basic needs, egalitarian viewpoint. It's not about luxury items. It's not like everyone should get the same stuff.
Yeah. I want to go back to the point with the banks that you were making. Now, to me, with that situation, I didn't want the government to bail them out. Yeah. Now, you say that like socialists, they wanted the banks to fail to get one, to see capitalism fail, pretty much.
Yeah.
And then, but me, I think the most capitalism stance on that would be to let the banks fail. Because, like any other business, you can't rely on the government. And I think bailing the banks out set a horrible precedent. Because now we're seeing, in my country at least, they're doing the same thing. Except this time, instead of the housing market, it's junk overpriced bonds. And they're inflating a giant bubble, and it's going to pop again. And all those people that invested in those bonds, they're going to get the short end of the stick. So, 10 years later, they're doing the same thing.
Yeah. I'm not sure if there was a question. Was you asking a question in that, or you just?
I was just making
a point. Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Now, I was just making a statement, like how I felt about like that, because
yeah. Well,
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say was, I'm not. When I say socialist, it's not as if there's a factual agreement on that, and I'm going to be quite careful about how I try and use my words today. So what I mean is a factual agreement is to be able to, as a factual idea, like a fact is something you can prove or disprove. So when I said, socialists would have wanted to see that happen, it's not really a fact, it's an opinion. So I was, it was a very broad brushstroke to say, socialist mind, like a socialist theory. I'm not talking about a socialist person. But in socialist theory, it would say, well, this is the failure of capitalism. It hasn't managed itself well enough that now society is going to fall apart because of it. But instead, it didn't follow its own. It depends how you sort of see capitalism following its own method through. But it's like you're saying, if you're a small business and you set up a business and, I don't know, it's not doing well, no one would sort of see it as the government's responsibility to, swoop in and sort of help you out because you made some bad financial decisions. You just close up shop, you'd be in debt, and you'd have to go and start something else. So should that be different for the banks in a capitalist society? Is what is what you're suggesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, that's what we're sort of both, yeah. So at that point, you know, you sort of say, well, you know, if that's how capitalism theoretically supposed to work, then just let it follow through to its own natural conclusion, which might be complete failure, which is, not saying it's going to end up complete failure, who knows where it would have ended up, but it certainly wasn't looking good in 2008, as you correctly update. So I feel that what's most important to me is rather than political sort of ideologies is the pitfalls of sort of life for each of us, you know, like for everyone, like a country's made up of people. It's not geography really. It's just where the people are located and where their government, you know, to the borders or the ocean or where it actually ends. But without the people, there's no country, you know, there's no government. So the idea of, you know, is to avoid those pitfalls. So if it means that something has to happen that borrows an ideology from elsewhere, then so be it. You know, there's a lot of shared thinking in trying to run a country, and there's lots of ideas that we borrow from other countries as well, like the way other people do things, rather than becoming very myopic or internal, looking very sort of isolationist view. So, you know, if you, I mean, what would be to gain by allowing that to happen? You know, like completely sort of collapse in that manner. Like everyone would have suffered. You know, it would just. I don't know if that'd be a good idea. You know, I don't. Well, again, I'll try and be careful because I don't know if that'd be an effective idea. You know, it just means that when it could be best avoided. You know, it's like a natural selection of capitalism, isn't it? You know?
Well, the theory is just holding people accountable.
Yeah, I think that's the difference. Is actually saying who's accountable. I think there were very few people who were held accountable at the end who might have actually saw any time at all. You know, and so as a white collar crime, I don't know the ins and outs of the law for that. If it was identified as a crime, what was going on, the sort of money and damage that was done to the economy was far more than me or you just breaking into a 7-Eleven and taking money from the till. Yet if we did that, we'd be in big trouble. You know,
I would say that the people that even got the loans for the housing market, they should be held accountable too. I mean, everyone, if they were giving out loans to pretty much anybody, and people knew, like, I can't afford to pay this and stuff like that, and they're all like, no, don't worry, we'll cover you. And it's the same thing that's going on now, except with bonds. So once the market crashes again, and then all these people that invested in these bonds, I'd say that they knew the risk going in.
Yeah. Well, I think just to sort of change a little bit of direction of the conversation, because I don't know enough about. I mean, I know a little bit of, like, you know, from what I remember through the media, like I was sort of selling off bad investments, you know, sort of watering them down and down, from what I understand. And people owned far too many properties that they couldn't possibly pay off. There was a bubble that had to burst. It just didn't seem that it could keep going on. But if we step back from that just for a bit, Glenn, and if you think of there's a missing ingredient in our maturity as a political ideology, and I say ours, it could be anyone's, like at any point in time. So when you look at, like, from the US point of view, like you look at some of the founding, like the intellectuals that sort of helped build America before it was even built. So people like Voltaire and Thomas Paine. These people weren't even in, like, you know, Voltaire was French and he went to England, he saw things quite differently, he complained about having to go to France, and started to pursue an idea of rationalism and, put religion aside and God and all that sort of stuff. And in many ways, you could argue that Thomas Paine was very much these two people, probably not in the sense that's political, like the way you might use the word now, but the way that liberals use at the moment in your country, but these were in the way that the word would be used here or in Europe. They were liberal-minded people. Like Thomas Paine was standing there saying, I don't care about the king and the queen. I don't care any different to me or you. So there's a real rejection of the value there. So they sort of felt that the missing ingredient of their society was again like a sense of our maturity. Like we can speak for ourselves. We can, things have to change here. There's some responsibility on us as an individual to help make that change, and us as a group to make that change. So when you look at a society, like any society, like you look at your country, and ours it's very similar in many, many ways. It's very similar in many, many ways. They're very different. But we both have freedom of speech, and there is but how much? And there's I think there's a sort of a spoken belief of reason and tolerance, but how much that's actually acted upon in those countries, I'm not too sure. Like we sort of say, oh yeah, well, we believe in reason and rational thinking. We also accept the idea of tolerance and all that sort of stuff, and that sort of exists. And then, there's a rejection of bigotry. Like, no one wants to be named a bigot. But of course there are people who are bigoted. There are. Mm-hmm. And there's also a rejection of things like superstition. Like we don't want those things because we don't, like you think of the maturity that me and you have adopted from people before us. Like, we know why plants grow. It's because we water them and the sun shines on them. They've got to be planted themselves, not because we pray to God that makes them grow. We don't do moon dances and stuff to sort of try and help, better weather or better crops. We understand how things, and even though we aren't scientists, we've come to learn this sort of knowledge, not at an arm's length away. We haven't done it ourselves. We've just learned a lot of these things. And if you think of science in that manner, it's a rejection of lots of superstition. So is the political science as well, like political ideology or political theories. Eventually we sort of go, well, Andy, what's not working here? Why is it that in our country, I'm not saying yours or mine, but any person saying, why is it we have this problem in this country, and that country over there doesn't have that problem? Because we're all on the same planet. There'll be cultural differences. But then you start to look at these things, a lot of those cultural differences are often they're fairly insignificant, just as ethnic differences are insignificant, because most people are going through the same sort of behaviours, because we're all part of an economy. So you start looking at what's the missing ingredient here. And so it's often people can become very bolstered to a view, or so as well, sorry, I'll just go back a bit. So when you look at those progressive thinkers like Voltaire or Paine, or even later, even in your own country, like Thoreau or Lincoln, there's been lots of them. Of course, in America, it's no short of its public intellectuals and academic intellectuals and so on. But and as we move forward, we wouldn't deny the changes that have been made, unless you were a bigoted person who was, or you didn't like reasoning. Like no one wants to see women lose the vote, or some would, but I think in the more sort of liberated sense, I don't think we want to. I certainly don't want to see women lose the vote. I don't want to see people of a certain ethnicity in space. In America, like African Americans, return to slavery or segregation. That would just be appalling. We don't. So we're at a point where we've accepted lots of changes, but to get those changes took a lot of struggle, particularly in your country. It took a lot to get to where you wanted to be, and a lot of blood was shed. So now we're at another point in life where you think, well, at a point in history, you think, well, what changes need to be made? What's the missing ingredient here that's actually going to show a sense of maturity to something? And that's for me, as much as you could say, not you, but anyone could talk about political theories or political historical events like this happened under this leader and so on and so forth. Eventually you sort of say, well, we don't live in the past, and it's good to learn from the past, and we don't know what the future holds, but we can move towards the future if we govern it in a certain way. But the real thing I would look at is a sense of integrity, which can bring about a type of clarity. So at any point you interject, Glenn, if I haven't made something clear, but what I want to say is if we took something that was, and we'll try and choose something really simple, as an artist, okay, because you said, well, introduce your artist. If I pick up a book, say, I don't know, it could be Shakespeare's Hamlet, just say something that we sort of roughly know. We know that it's a play, we know that there's a guy called Hamlet. And the integrity of me as a reader is, whether I like it or not doesn't matter, but am I going to enter the reading of that play or the viewing of that play with a level of integrity to try and understand what's being spoken, what's this about, what's being said, not whether I like it or dislike it, not that I think um, a, a valuable thing, or it's just, do I have the integrity to understand it? So it's like people who want to dismiss certain things, like I don't like cats, I only like dogs. And are you actually looking at the animal with the level of integrity to say that is a living animal? That's a sentient being, no different to your dog. It's a living thing, and your personal opinion on it, are you really approaching the level of technology? I want to really try and understand this thing in front of me as a living being, as a living thing, not as in a scientific sense, just as a thing that is alive and doing its own behaviour. So it's like our conversation now. Like you've invited me on to have a talk about something, and I would hope that in that sense there's an integrity that you have to sort of think, I'm going to try and get a grasp of what Phil's saying here. What's he really about? Now, when you really do that, and I'll go back to being in the arts. So as a painter or drawer, when you look at something, you sort of think, it's not just simply, I'm just going to draw a flower. I can already draw. And if you ask us like later, am I really thinking about the subject here? Am I really trying to look at this thing as a form of integrity to try and whatever that is, like some sort of form of expression which you can't really control? Or if I approach it from an entertainment point of view, am I just trying to make something colourful and splashy that people go, wow, that's really clever? So a good example would be something closer to home in the US is if you think of recent wars that the US and Australia have both been involved in, so I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, like Afghanistan, both Iraq wars, or back to Vietnam. And we've seen, say, particular movies that have probably tried to address that with a level of integrity. So that people really suffered in these wars, or documentaries, and they've really tried to say, I really want to try and get an understanding of what happened here and how it made people feel and how people suffered, or how there was a moral right here or a moral wrong, whatever the case may be, or how things were behaved ethically. There were things that both governments or neither governments were ethically behaved in a certain manner, but there's level of integrity to get to that. Now, I don't think, because me and you know each other through video game culture, and that when we take something like Call of Duty, I don't think there's no real level of integrity to try and get a better understanding of what war is like. It's just all entertainment, and that doesn't mean that the game is wrong. Those games can be fun, but you're not really going to really get a real understanding of a type of integrity of like, let me really tell you about the horrors of war. You know what I'm saying? It's like looking at like Schwarzenegger movies like Commando. They're just the amount of stuff that blows up, and it's all just entertainment. It's very different from other films that might be made, which might move them towards something like art. Now, I'm not getting on about art here. I'm just talking about an approach to sort of thinking about how do we think about political opinions today. And often it seems to me that we're getting into a much more, not you and I, just in society, is becoming more polarised, more polemic. There is no middle ground to have a conversation, because it's like they're going for a sporting team. They just want their team to win. So there's no level of integrity to try and understand each other. What is it that people's values and opinions, where do they lie? What are they fearful of? What are they afraid of? Because both people are driven by certain wants for change, because they feel change needs to be made to occur, because they're not happy with something. And that's what I feel as like I was saying before, like, an ingredient that could, I don't know what this ingredient is, but to just demonstrate a level of maturity that we're not just like a couple of schoolyard kids flinging stones at each other, or just sort of being contrary, or that's what you say, or that's what you think. It's a mistake of sort of when someone says something like, let me tell you the truth, or I'm telling you the truth. Well, they're really just telling you their opinion, just as I'm telling you my opinion.
Yeah.
There's no truth in it. It's just an opinion. But how do we make it clear that we both understand each other? Anyway, that's so. I just feel that was probably, I know it's a long, sort of convoluted, but I think it's important to sort of think about that as a peculiar value when trying to get grasp of, like say in the case of the financial crisis 2008, what was the maturity of the government there? Did they act in a mature way? Was their maturity the missing ingredient? Had they not done it, would have been a much worse situation, even though it might have been contrary to their actual political ideologies. Like is it a level of maturity to say, look, yeah, okay, we thought capitalism was the best thing, but we're not going to double down on it. We need to do something. So it might have been the mature response to do, even though it might have been seen, oh, that's hypocritical. But we're all hypocritical, and that doesn't excuse them. But it's sort of like it wasn't that long ago, and not, well, I won't get into any part politics, but yeah, I think that might be the mature thing. It might be a symbol of a maturity to say, hey, we need to do this because we don't, we're in trouble, even though it flies in the face of what they actually stand for. Because
and see, that's where I would disagree, because I think the mature thing would be to take responsibility for your actions.
Well,
that's just.
I mean, that's right. It's again, it's all opinion. So if they had taken responsibility for whose actions in this case, I'm not causing an argument here, but it's the banks, like you said. Did they actually pursue the banks? Like, are those people who thought this about, are they still in the banks? Like, maybe they shouldn't be there, but maybe they still are there. This is the problem. I don't know. But I promise you, if you or I in either of our countries keep breaking traffic laws, they'll just take our license off us. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And we shouldn't be allowed to drive if we keep driving, in disorderly fashion, mounting the pavement, getting drunk, speeding, just park our car wherever we want. Like you just said, look, you're not fit to drive a car, because you just prove time and time again we just can't have you on the road.
Yep.
But it might be the case with all these bankers shouldn't be, maybe they shouldn't be anywhere near banks, but they just can't be trusted.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's very easy to me to look across and say, oh, like I'll be driving in traffic and someone cuts me off. I look at this jerk who's cut me off. Did he really cut me off? And maybe I wasn't watching. I'm just projecting my feeling. Because again, like, the truth is different to the facts. So, like, say for instance, if you bit into an apple, I don't know, and you bit in and there was a worm inside, and then you said, well, I'll never eat another apple again because that's only going to happen again. Well, that's not the truth that it's going to happen again, and it's certainly not a fact that it's going to happen again. We don't. Do you see what I'm saying? We don't. That's just an opinion. You're just saying, well, in my opinion, that will happen again, so I'm never going to do that. It's like someone say they're not going to walk under a ladder because they're going to get bad luck, and you're sort of thinking, this is irrational. It doesn't hold that this will happen again. So in the case of repeated performances that we can do ourselves, we know the things that we do wrong, and they can be often measured by, school teachers, not measure your grades and marks, the amount of time you didn't hand in time. Traffic cameras, they catch you speeding, or parking fines. There's various levels of this, and we can do it ourselves. If you eat too much, you're going to find you put on too much weight, and then people will get irrational about that. So it's not my fault, it's because of something else, and it could be something else for me. But we sort of know on ourselves where things are wrong, but we're not as we can sort of be much more blunt when it comes to other people without even knowing all the facts. Because often we don't even know all the facts in our own decisions. Like I said, if someone cuts me off in traffic, if someone cuts me off in traffic, he's the worst person in the world.
Yeah.
But in truth, is it maybe I was to blame? It's very one-sided because I don't know all the details. If that makes sense, I don't know if that's a really good analogy. But so I guess what I'm trying to push here is a lot of this is going to be opinion-based, and we haven't talked much about democratic socialism yet, but a lot of it's going to come down to opinion.
And I wanted to ask you a little bit about democratic socialism too, because to me, Bernie Sanders is trying to sell the American people on this ideology. But I guess my question to you is what is the democracy in democratic socialism? Because to me, in seeing Bernie talk and looking at his plans, the only democracy in it is still being able to vote for our leaders. Other than that, he's going to decide all the plans, and we're just going to have to do it. So I guess my question is what's the democracy to you in democratic socialism?
Well, I don't. I mean, I know a bit about Bernie Sanders, of course, from a distance, and I think a lot of it. Well, I'll just say what it is for me. All right, what I vote for. Now, I'm not someone. Let's just state who I am for people who don't know. I'm a, and we'll put it in the most blunt language. I'm white, male, heterosexual, able-bodied, tertiary educated, and graduate educated as well. Um, um,
They call you a cis
and
white male.
what is it?
They'd call you a cis white male, which
What's
I
this,
get
this one?
is just a straight, normal white male.
All right. So yeah. So white male, tertiary educated, English speaking, able bodied. Um, I have a mortgage. You know, I'm upwardly mobile, if it's or financially agile in that sense. You know, like I'm not. You know, I'm not wanting for anything. There's things I want. I'd like to have my mortgage gone. You know, but there's nothing more to me that I can ask for society to do for me. I've received a lot of those benefits already. You know, like in this Australian system, we have a tertiary education system where tuition fees are deferred. It's referred to as HECS. And so you don't pay any tuition fees until you start earning a certain amount of money. There's no tax on it. And then the government just takes a percentage out of your pay. So there's no pressure, there's no interest building. So it's not. But then a PhD is completely free. If you want to do a doctorate, there's no tax on that at all. So there's you know, as we talked about, there's a Medicare system. We also have public housing for people who can't be able to afford rent, very low rent or no rent, depending on the situation, and so on and so forth. Now, it's not perfect. None of it's perfect. But I would see that as my view is we have a democracy here. You do get to vote. But both of our parties here, one is called the two major parties, the Labour Party, which was born out of the union movement, and the other one's called the Liberal Party. And the Liberal Party is the equivalent of your Conservative Party, like the Republican Party. And they were originally a Liberal government, but over the years they've become more conservative. But even still, our Conservative Party is much closer to Bernie Sanders than your Republican Party, because neither of those parties want to abolish Medicare and want to get rid of, want to make it full paying and tuition fees for education or anything like that. So for me, I feel that there's the responsibility of a government is to secure the lives of its citizens. Now, what I mean by secure, like offer security there, this goes right back to people like Thomas Hobbes in his Leviathan, where you enter this sort of social contract with the government. So the example he gives is, you know, you vote a leader in, and then the majority of the vote, you know, that's the leader we get, and the minority have to accept that leadership. They don't have to like it. They can still, you know, they're free to protest, but they have to accept that's the outcome. But having said that, the leader can't have conscription for war, because the whole idea of a leader is the preservation of our lives, not the ending. We can choose to go and fight, but we can't be made to fight. So the security there, it could extend as far as that. Now, I think nearly every country on the planet has had conscription at one point or another, including Australia. So what's the function of a government that's going to send you to your death in the most extreme case? So in the case of more gentler ones, is in a contemporary world, it's very hard to function as a citizen if you don't have a house, an education, and your health. Clearly, health is, you know, a priority, and that your health's not going to last long without a house. So you just can't go and build a house anyway. You just can't do that in Australia. You just can't go out and start carving up public land or private property, you know, or council land or whatever. You've got to lease property or buy property. So as economies have become more and more increasingly complicated, how do people function in that society where there's a discrepancy between, you know, some people having literally billions of dollars and some people having, you know, very, very low wages. So so therefore you have again like a more of a socialist mindset that would actually bring in certain legislation to bring back things like minimum wages that actually are adjusted to the standard of living that's required today, for basic needs. So you can pay your rent, so you can afford medical health, so you can get an education. Because without those things, the society's not getting better if you have people who are homeless or people who are of ill health or people who are uneducated. They're just off on a bad step. It doesn't make sense to me. So for me, I'll always throw my vote in the direction of people who are not yet afforded the opportunities that I've had. So we have very dire situations for the native Australians, like the Australian Aboriginals. There's been a long-going case of neglect there, and they're overrepresented in areas where they shouldn't be overrepresented.
See, I wanted to ask you about this too, because do you think that with the Aboriginals, do you think that the government stepping in helped them or hurt them?
Well, the problem with the idea of Indigenous people, there aren't many countries that recognise Indigenous people, and wherever they recognise them, they do poorly. And I'm not sure if it's because there's so clear difference between, when the Spanish and French and the English arrived in the Americas. Broadly speaking, the South, there were Indigenous people there, and they identified them as different, and therefore there was no time for them to. The idea of assimilation didn't really occur, and so when the English arrived here, the Aboriginal people were just sort of seen as not occupying the land, which is crazy. Of course they were. They've been here for 40,000 plus years, but they didn't know that at the time. And not that mattered if they knew it or not, they still were occupying. And when you look at that colonial beginnings, it goes from the sort of noble savage idea, it soon becomes the ignoble savage. At first they thought they were great, and they sort of saw them, and they started sort of producing propaganda and material that sort of made them bad. And then there was a whole thing called the stolen generation, where they started taking children away from them to educate them. It was all very badly managed. And some of it might have been done with good intentions, some with deliberately ill intentions. Like the Aboriginal people of Tasmania, the island which is south of the continent, there was genocide there. They completely wiped them out. The English did. Just complete genocide. So there's a real atrocity. There's a very, very horrible history in Australia. Like Robert Hughes in his book Faded Shore described Tasmania as the most violent place on the earth at that time. But the British were particularly cruel to the convicts. So you had this very, very nasty kind of, Australia would have been like another planet back then, coming from England. So the attitude towards the Indigenous was pretty basic, and that just continued for so long. And then there was a royal commission to look at certain issues surrounding Aboriginal health and so on and so forth. But it's just been neglected for so long that it's become very, very complicated and very, very complex. It has a lot of moving parts, but there are pushes to try and correct it. And I'll always vote in that direction, because it's not. They were perfectly happy for tens of thousands of years, which is evidence alone that they were doing fine until Europeans and others settled down here. So you can't blame them for their situation. It's because we, as in not me personally, because I just was born here, but as a historical link, they were fine until us others came here. And you have to take some responsibility for that eventually, and it should be taught that history in schools, so it's not repeated, so it is corrected. Now, I'm not sure the decision is, I'm not a part of any legislation around how that's done, but there's certain benefits that are afforded to Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders, who are also Indigenous people like the very top of Queensland, their sort of island culture. And I think they should be afforded certain extras it's not throwing money up and far from it. It's just trying to assist them because they're in a bracket where they shouldn't be. Of course, there's lots of professional Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders as well. That's not the case, but there are a lot of that's being forgotten, and a lot of them are city dwellers as well. But I'm talking in a very casual manner here. I don't know the stats on it. I don't know all the details. But it's a topical situation in Australia that still largely goes. It's not fully ignored, but we could say ignored. Not enough has been done, and there's always a push to get more done. And governments have done, like our previous Prime Minister John Howard refused to say sorry for its previous histories in this country. As soon as Kevin Rudd came in, he just said sorry straight away. There's no repercussions for it. It was a symbolic gesture. But sometimes symbolic gestures are important to move forward. It again, that could have been, as I keep saying, the missing ingredient of maturity. It's a mature attitude to admit that you've done fault. You know what I mean? And that's no different to a nation. If we see one as an identity, we have to stand up to our mistakes. And you look at the history of some countries like Germany, and look at their appalling history in the 20th century. And they teach all that in schools. They don't want another Holocaust. They don't want another war, another 2 wars like they had. So it's important to say, hey, and you think of German philosophy and thinking of the 19th century and beforehand, like, people like Goethe, all the way through, Kant, Hegel, Karl Marx, like him or not, doesn't matter, Engels, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, an amazing string of brilliant minds. And it ended up putting them in the trenches. What went wrong? So eventually it's like the recovery effort. Like we've got to be mature about this. We've got to look at what we've done wrong and correct it. And I think that's like any person, and that a nation should be no different. And if you looked at recent history, like ones that we've grown up with, and again, like another, like, I remember in the 80s, the attitude towards homosexuals was by nowadays today's standards, it seems pretty appalling. Well, it was appalling, and how the AIDS was treated and ignored, saw it as particularly just a gay cancer. That's not true. Anyone could have got AIDS. It just happened to be in that community, and other people were getting it, but it was sort of demonised. And I think from history, back then, in particular in the US, they just got a whole bunch of gay rights, and they were going to get them taken away again because of the disease. And you think, well, where's the maturity, with homophobia or attitude towards homosexuals? Like, how is it any different? No, I think I might have been saying before, I can't remember, but if I say to people, Shrim and I announced that my wife or my fiance or girl, we're going to get married, well, that's fantastic. That's great news. And no one sort of looks into our private life. But if two people of the same sex that get married, people take offence to it. They don't look at the larger part of their life as actually just platonic. They're just two people, dearly care for each other, which we just call love. So if you look at me and you, Glenn, who've never met, we share a lot of things in common. And if we were flatmates, we'd socialise and hang out. And there's no reason why there could be some sort of what you would call like a kindred spirit, which we could just casually call love. But that doesn't mean we're physically intimately involved with each other. But even in any relationship, that's a very small percentage of your relationship is actual physical intercourse, like sexual intercourse. It's a very small part. But the lack of maturity around people seems to focus on this very small bit of the relationship, ignoring the fact that two people actually care for each other. I don't understand it. To me, it's a lack of maturity to me, and that ingredient of maturity to me. This is an opinion. It's not a fact. It's an opinion. Means that people are not moving in a rational, like I said before. If you look at that Enlightenment era, and because they're talking about, I'm talking to you as someone in the US. You are the great secular republic, the first of its kind. It was meant to be. It was built on rational thinking. It was built on the age of reason. It was a secular state. Separation of government religion. The state religion. So when you look at this, you think, well, let's think about this rationally. Let's not put superstition in there. Let's take all that stuff out. And let's look at these people as full citizens, whether they're, I'm not just talking about homosexuals, who are gay or lesbian, whatever. I'm talking about all people. So when people, whether they're destitute, prostitute, whatever, like, they're still people. And you've got to, and putting bigotry aside or irrational thinking or superstition, let's be more mature about it and look forward, like the forefathers that are so often celebrated in the time of today that we live in. We've got to take up that mantle. You've got to sort of think, well, we can't stay where we are. We just can't say, this is it, we've arrived at the perfect place in history, nothing's going to change now, we'll just stay like this forever. That seems completely irrational to me, because this isn't ideal. Like, I think late capitalism, as we understand, say, like where we are now, has run its course. Like, if we keep going this way, what happens? I'm not advocating communism, but there are certain things in this country. We have lots of negative gearing, we have people owning multiple homes. Now, I'm not against people having lots of homes, but it's a problem when there's some people who don't even have a home. You sort of think, hang on a minute, this is a supply and demand thing. you know, people, you know, it's to put in another equation, if someone has all the food and other people are starving, we can't eat all that food. There isn't enough meals in their life to eat all that food. So what are you doing with it? Maybe you should share it around some. So it's a similar sort of, you know, it's a supply and demand thing. You can't, and then the world hasn't seen such wealth, you know, and it's not saying I want what they've got. I'm not one of those socialists who says, I can't have it, you can't have it. I'm not begrudging people's fine art or expensive dresses or going to the opera or skiing in Tokyo or whatever, in Japan, that's fine. But I'm talking about basic needs, the essential things that we have a government for, to secure or preserve our existence. And I think that takes a level of maturity to see past party politics, is my view. And that's my opinion. Don't know if that helps.
Well, back to the gay marriage thing. You know what? I got the perfect solution to end it all. And that would be just get the government out of marriage completely.
Yeah, there you go.
If you didn't have the government involvement with it, you wouldn't have any of the problems. Like, if you just let people freely do what they want to do with their partner, go right ahead. But they've turned marriage into a business almost.
Well, it's because of certain things like, say, for instance, if I would go and I was in the public service, and I got promoted. I was offered a diplomatic position, and I was going to Washington, and I couldn't bring my partner because your government, let's say, at a time when they didn't recognise gay marriage or gay partners as a civil right, they would say, well, you can come, but why are you bringing this other person? Oh, we don't recognise that as anything. So the problem with governments, it's the legislation. I think it's what do these things mean? How do we acknowledge them? And I agree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. But unfortunately, we live in a world where cultures collide, or they connect. Not so much collide. We're very much in each other's pockets all the time. Not pockets, not finances, but we're in each other's backyards. You know, there are a lot of them. You know, there's probably a US citizen in this cafe right now where I'm sitting, probably working behind the counter. And there's US people here, military. There's US people here, ambassadors, all sorts of people, lecturers, you know. And so therefore you sort of think, well, how do these countries communicate with each other? How do we recognise each other's civil standards, you know, like levels of citizenship? So the fact that Australia recently had a plebiscite and now gay marriage is accepted here, then that only means something, provided if I was an ambassador and I had a gay partner, let's call that person Frank, and me and Frank want to move to the UK because we've got off jobs. Well, they'll accept him because they accept gay marriage. But if we want to go to a country where they don't identify gay marriage, they don't identify it in any way, then Frank may not be able to come with me. So you sort of mean, so all of a sudden it means you're not afforded the same equal opportunity as someone who's heterosexual on that ground. Even though you're very professional at your job, it doesn't matter, you know, so you're limited. So it's unfortunate that that's the way it is. So until you actually remove that altogether, and not just in your country, but other countries as well, then it means that communication amongst diplomats and ambassadors starts to fall apart. And we can't afford that, because we can't be isolated. We just can't. You know, the world's very connected, financially, economically, agriculturally. Like Australia sends bees to your country, tons of bees, because I think we're the only place on the planet that still has bees that, you know, don't have a certain parasite that destroys hives. So we send bees to your country to pollinate your crops. You know, that's a relationship that needs to be held. Otherwise, you won't have any. You won't be able to pollinate your fruit, you know, and vegetables.
Yep.
So you think that, and you think, oh, it's just bees. And you think, well, how are you going to get out and pollinate yourself? You know, you can get out there and rub flowers together. And so it's good to have strong, solid relationships with other countries. So if one country says, oh, we're just going to abolish marriage, then how does a country this side say, oh, Glenn Updike wants to come over and he's bringing this person with him called, you know, Jessica? And he goes, well, what does that mean? He goes, oh, I don't know, we don't have marriage, it's just up to them, they do what they want. We need to know if Jessica's actually is she just going to come here and go rogue and run off and just, we don't know who she is. Are these two people committed? You've got to go and say, oh, we just don't, we don't care. We've got no measure of that. We don't take any notice of it. It makes it complicated, doesn't it? You've got to have some sort You know what I mean? It's just unfortunate the world's got very, very complicated. And this is coming from when I was a teacher. Like, you think about it, you can do 13 years of school, kindergarten through to your final year of college. Is that the right term? You know, when you graduate?
Yeah.
Am I using that right? Yeah. So
Well,
year 12. So,
it's K through 12.
yeah. So it's kindergarten through to 12. So that's 13 years of schooling to prepare you to be an adult in a manner. And you think that's how complicated have we made this? And then on top of that, you might go and do a degree or an apprenticeship or be trained on the job. And you think, man, society's got so complicated. And that's just for professional stuff. And it's no different to bureaucracies. It's just incredibly complicated, unfortunately. But they don't know. It's like an unnecessary evil. Not that I believe in the word evil. I just mean it's just an unnecessary inconvenience. I mean, it's a necessary inconvenience. It's just. But I know I can sympathise with you. But it's just civil union. Like banks want to know about everything. It's just. I don't know. It's very complicated, isn't it? I guess is what I'm pointing at. I don't have the answer, but I could certainly see how it can lubricate relationships outside of one country to another, and understanding each other's position, as a citizen, I guess. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
So we were talking the other night, and we both agreed on something. It was that we believe in equality for opportunity, but not equality in the end game. I think.
Yeah.
And I think our opinions on that, we agree on the basic principle of it, but I think we view it differently in some ways. Because you brought up an equal opportunity to go to college.
Yeah.
And to me, that's just a chapter in your life. I think what's being proposed here is everyone gets free college.
Yeah.
And I think that's the wrong way of going about things. I think there's going to be a lot of wasted resources. People going for a year or two just to try it out, drop out, and things like that. And I look at life as a series of chapters, and people are treating this okay, so this is the end game. Is you graduate, you get your free college, and they're looking at that as the end game, whereas I look at that as a chapter in your life. So I guess my question is how do you view equal opportunity versus equal end game?
Well, using your college example, for instance, or what we call university here, I guess that's what you mean by college there, is it? University, college?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, a tertiary education. Well, first of all, I know people who have got 3 majors and they don't use their degrees in any form of capacity at all. In the sense they don't use it for a career or for private jobs.
I know a person that went to college for 2 or 3 years for business, and now they're making sandwiches at Subway.
Yeah. So that's a good example. Well, now, or the sort of anecdotal evidence we're using here to describe that not everyone who finishes a degree actually uses that degree in any form of capacity. Now, let's take something that has what I'd like to talk about just briefly is built-in obsolescence. So there are every year New Year's Eve occurs, of course. At the end of the year, we have the start of the year, we have a new year, and Australia is one of the first major cities that celebrates the New Year in. I think New Zealand might be before that, or Fiji, but a lot of eyes sort of turn their attention to Sydney because of the natural harbour there. And they have a big fireworks display. And it costs millions and millions of dollars to have a fireworks display. They just blow it up. It's literally blow up millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it has a very immediate built-in obsolescence. You don't get to fire a firecracker twice. And you know guns, you work in a gun shop. Your bullets only have one shot. You don't get to use them twice. They have a built-in obsolescence. You fire off a round and they have no function again. The gunpowder's spent.
Well, technically, Phil, you could reload bullets now.
No, you can reload them, but what I'm saying is the gunpowder's spent, isn't it?
Yeah, the
It
gunpowder
needs
is
fresh
spent.
gunpowder.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Fresh
So
primer, fresh lead.
yeah, they're fresh lead. So you've got the what's the canister called? I'm calling it the shell. What's that called? What's the actual name of the shell? It's just the shell.
Yeah, just a shell.
The bronze shell.
That's
Yeah, the shell.
yep.
So you can take the shell and you can repack it, put the lead back in, and close it up. But the bullet's gone. Like it's no longer.
The actual
it's fully
bullet's gone.
Yeah, so it's now, that's what we call built-in obsolescence. Now, with an education, though, it doesn't really have a built-in obsolescence. And that's what I'm arguing. So that person, in the sandwich shop, their 3-year degree, we have to look at it, like you said, in chapters. At the moment, they're making sandwiches, but we don't know what they'll go on to do, and we don't know if they're going to use their education. They may have children and help educate their own children, or a neighbour, or they may end up using that degree later on in life. They may actually turn around and go, I'm sick of this, I'm going to do something else with it. We don't really know how far an education stretches. So here I am talking to you, and you're talking to me. So there's a dialectic conversation here, and we both have an educated view in some regard on these topics. We're not. I don't think we're completely guessing at what we're saying, but we're not experts on what we're discussing here. But we are coming from a position of trying to understand the subject, and therefore we're informing each other. Now, when you do have a greater knowledge, if we turn to something like art history, I could certainly give a much more detailed education on aspects of art history and certain approaches or methods for art appreciation and certain ideas around art theory. It's how it may be used to improve or better or make life more enjoyable. Now, you may disagree with any of those things, but I certainly have an education on it. We could talk about it. Now, I'm no longer a teacher, but I did use my degree formally to be a teacher at both a little bit of primary, secondary, and tertiary level. Now, even if I didn't have that, I still exhibit and publish and design books. And then you think, well, you are using the degree, but you wouldn't have to do any of that to use your degree because you're still going to use it day to day. You're still an informed person. So the real function of an education isn't necessarily turning into a career. The end goal is to get an education. A career is just one part of it. You could go and get an education. Now, I'm not saying you're not educated. Everyone's educated on one level or another. And going to tertiary, getting a tertiary education doesn't mean that you're smarter or more intelligent or brighter than the next person.
Oh, believe me, I know that.
Yeah. But to be fair, though, those people who have gone and done a degree, they may have, if they know their subject, they may have a more detailed understanding of the subject, but that doesn't mean they've necessarily got a way of, and this is going back to something we talked about before, like when I talk about integrity, they may not be able to give a clarity of understanding. So there's something missing there as well. They may know it really well, but they may not be able to pass that information on. But they may use that information to inform the way they behave in society. Now, I'm what a lot of my friends know, sort of seeing me as an autodidact. Most of what I know is not from a formal education. It's just because I like to read philosophy and I have an interest in poetry and I take an interest in Shakespeare and book design, things like this. And some of it's been educated, but most of it hasn't. It's just an interest of mine. And I'm sure you're the same. There's lots of things you have an interest in. It's not because you went and studied political science or you went and studied Marxism. It's just something you're interested in.
Yep.
So that is an education. It's just not a formal education. So you can put too much emphasis on a formal education. So I don't see it. To me, I don't feel like there's a to use it. And people may not agree with this, but I don't think there isn't a built-in obsolescence to an education. You know something. It doesn't mean you're not forever either. You could just go to waste. It could just disappear, and you don't remember it anymore. But you'd hope that they might retain some of it, and they may build on it. And to quote Voltaire, they may cultivate that garden. It may grow into something bigger and better, or more generous. It may bear fruit. It could be something really good. But we just don't know unless you go down there. So again, the level of maturity here, like I said, the missing ingredient, if you want to have a more, it's not so much about equal opportunity, that's a part of it. But the other one is, the end game here is you can have people who are better informed, and therefore they might be more responsible voters, more responsible citizens. They might, I don't know, there's various aspects that could be good for. I wouldn't think that having an education, if it was a genuine, what I mean by genuine is that I don't know how you measure whether some knowledge is better than others.
I got a pretty good idea. Like,
well,
I think
well, I mean,
what is it, Northwestern University here in the States, they teach you can get a degree in lesbian dance theory. I think that's a pretty worthless frickin' education.
I think you'll find that it probably won't have much application. And I'm not defending it. I don't know enough about it. But the large part of education is also critical thinking. So what I'm saying is your brief criticism on that could easily be critiqued, and you could have a very good critical reasoning for why that's just a waste of time. But we'd have to go through that, wouldn't we? So in all fairness, we would have to sort of get a very clear assessment of whether that's worthwhile or not. But I think we can come to a quicker conclusion and say, it's certainly not something I want to do, it's certainly something you don't want to do. We have no value in it. Doesn't mean it doesn't have any value. I just don't value it. I just don't want to do it.
I could probably almost guarantee you whoever has a diploma in lesbian dance theory is probably making sandwiches in the sandwich shop.
Yeah, that's right, but it doesn't mean they haven't received an education or something unless we look at the value of that subject. You see what I'm trying to say? I'm not. Look, the subject could be a load of nonsense. I don't know. It could be amazing. I have no idea. But I'm never going to find out. It's very unlikely I'm never going to sign up for that subject. So I think that
people spend $100,000 to master in that. It's just crazy.
Yes, yeah. So then you look at. You'd have to look into it because if it's did you say it was lesbian dance theory or
just
feminist?
Lesbian dance theory.
Yeah, it's a lesbian dance theory. So it would have probably it was going to branch into ideas of feminism and all sorts of stuff, but I don't know where it would go to. It would take I have no idea what it's about. I can't even begin to comment on it. I don't know what it means. I know what it means in a guessing sense, but I think this is sort of where you can get into the value of like, let's look at the Daytona, people just driving around in a circle. Now, the value of it, people go, oh yeah, it brings lots of profit, it brings tourism and all this sort of stuff. But then you can go, what's its intellectual value? Now, people will say it's just a load of nonsense, people just spinning around, but I can actually argue, I think it takes a particular intellect to remain concentrating going at that speed. Like, it's not as simple as it looks.
And it's physical, too. A lot of people...
That's right, it's physical. Yeah, so people just say anyone could be a Grand Prix driver. Well, that's just nonsense. That's like saying anyone could be a test pilot. It takes a certain intellect. And what I mean is an intellect, I don't mean like, I've read all the books in the world. I mean a particular behaviour in the brain that allows you to remain concentrating under certain pressures, under certain stresses. Like an air traffic controller. I could not be an air traffic controller. I would end up with a stomach ulcer so big I wouldn't be able to swallow food. I'd just be stressed out of my brain. So the idea of, like it's like as you get to a certain age, like some people are too scared to do a forward roll, even though they'll say, look, you've got your head on the ground, you just got to fall forward. But it feels like they're going to fall a long way. They rationally think that they're going to break their back, but they're not going to. Their head's already on the ground. They're not going to break their neck. They're just going to topple over. So there's a certain intellect there that's stopping them from doing certain activities. There's a certain fear. It's just how they feel. It's just what makes up who we are. So people who sort of look at something like and say, oh, that's easy, that's just driving a car. You think, well, no, there's a cognitive. It's just like reverse parallel parking. It's a spatial awareness. And some people drive with much better, like with much more ease than others. And some of them go on to be, and some people have a certain innovative courageousness to be a driver. They're willing to take risks and they're willing to assess risks very, very quickly. Like risk assessments like the test pilots when they've no longer got control of the vehicle or the plane and they abort. Whereas others may feel they've never got control of it, and they just don't dare do it. So I think that, when we look at these things, it's very hard to evaluate them when we don't fully understand them. We can value the outcome of them because we understand the outcome. We go, oh yes, I understand why that's worthwhile because it has an economic value because it brings tourism and blah 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 and sponsorship, and that's a very capitalist mindset. But we don't know what the outcome of some of these other things are. Not everything. We don't live in economies. There's some things that come out of like we were talking about, like social capital. For the society's better good, especially like you living in a small town like I once lived in. Where's the like a soup kitchen, or Sikh temples where they feed thousands of people for free every day. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people. No questions asked. I don't care who you are. If you come in, they'll feed you a meal any time.
Yeah, we have soup. I live in a very small town, and even we have a soup kitchen type thing where once a month we give free food. The church gives out free food to people.
Yeah, and there's no economic outcome there. It's done out of goodwill, and it's not a bad thing. So you don't know, where these things can lead to, and that's what I'm saying. Like the Sikhs, that religion of Sikhs, they feed thousands of people, and they have Sikh temples here in Melbourne. So and this is going back to where we sort of started. Like when you have numerous, various kind of religious beliefs and ideologies, then that's not a negative thing, because it doesn't matter whether you agree with those, you have to join them. But you start to see that most of them are trying to do something that I would consider positive. That doesn't mean I like religion. I'm not opposed to religion. I'm not as fond of the clergy who interpret their ideas of religious, their religious sort of scholars or their religious books. That's a different discussion altogether. But when you sort of move around in a city that's got various ethnicities and various religious groups and various different behaviours, you start to realise that where there's no dominant one, that there is no normality as such. There's no normal.
Oh no, I mean,
so like French Catholicism in its day, you had to be Catholic, and they didn't have, there were minorities there. Like Jews would have been, Judaism was a minority. So therefore, when you get one religion, it's easy to govern one religion or one ideology. When you get two, you've got a battle. When you got heaps, well, now you've got a healthy society. You've got the duplicity of ideas floating around, and they can be shared. You can better understand each other, and that's a healthy thing. It's and that's no different to an education. When you get a university where you get a duplicity of academic pursuits, that means that hopefully you would hope, if these things are true to what they're supposed to be, like the cornerstones of academic research, and that includes scientific research, philosophical conversation, political conversation, and experiments. And these are sort of things we can't do anymore, so we rely on universities to do it, prior to the sort of invention of, lens grinding and optics, we just saw with our senses, like going back to Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, we just understood the world pretty much through our senses. So if we looked at the moon, it was just a disc up there with a naked eye. You can't see craters. You can see a little bit of a mark or something, but not really. You get a lens, all of a sudden you can see craters. You get a better lens, you can see the rings around Saturn. You get a better one, you see the moons around Jupiter or whatever. And eventually, or maybe Jupiter first, I don't know which one you can see, but then you get a Hubble telescope, you're looking at the edge of the galaxy into other ones. Now, these aren't the extension of our senses. Our senses can't do that. So we end up knowing things we couldn't possibly know without having all this continuous invention. So it keeps building and building and building. And you don't know where this sort of ends up. You just don't know. Now, and you know, from the computer game point of view, computer games have played a very big role in the development of computer engineering and software engineering. Like early graphics, color games, basic AI. I mean, I would actually, I'd be interested to hear an argument, but I would say that computer game technology, software and hardware engineering is probably one of the things that's propelled computer engineering and software more, equally as much as anything else.
It's definitely propelled AI, that's for sure.
Yeah, heaps of it. Now, if we rely on the government to say we need to make computer games, they're not going to make computer games. And they would look upon it and said it's just foolishness. They try to ban computer games are violent. They're this, they're that, and the other. What a waste of time. Who's going to go? Why would you go? But once it starts making money, people get an economic understanding of it. But people, as a kid, thought, what a waste of time. What value does it have? It's just stupid. Get rid of it. But now, the Xbox camera, which Microsoft had there was 100 engineers working on a camera, and, being picked up by various other people because they sort of allowed people to reverse engineer it. There's various things that have come out of computer gaming that have been positive to be used for other things. So you don't know where things are going to go. And something like as much as a lesbian dance school, I have no idea where that could go. It could go nowhere. It could be a load of nonsense. It could be absolute waste of time.
Well,
I don't know. I don't know.
If that if you wanted to make a career out of that, you're going to have to rely on a lot of lesbians that want to dance.
Yeah, well, but we don't know what the subject's really about. Is what I'm trying to do. I don't know, so I can't really pass an opinion on it other than I don't want to do it, and that doesn't mean that I'm disrespectful of it. And this is where we can get into sort of, like me, the fear of political correctness of saying something wrong. There's nothing wrong with me saying that's not for me. I don't want it. Fine, if they were making that course available and people want to pay tuition for it, go for it. And if they're going to make it free for everyone, then people either enroll or they won't.
But it's not. This is the one thing is it's not going to be free. Everybody's taxes are going to go up a lot to pay for all this.
Yeah.
So it's not really
right.
free.
Well, I mean, I think that you just said the word tax there. I think that the view of tax in the US, from my personal understanding, is it's very much a dirty word in the US.
Not really. I would think. Honestly, now, Phil, I think it's pretty much split. There's people that hate taxes, and then there's people that actually they understand the basic need for them.
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
that's what they would say. I'm against a lot of the worthless taxes that we have. Like, there's a lot of things that we get taxed for that I think we shouldn't be getting taxed for. It's just double dipping.
That becomes it's an invalid point, like, where you say some things I agree with and some I don't. Like, so there's things there that a lot of the taxes that, that I would have paid in my life continue to pay on, what's called GST, just a general services tax. Like I could buy a book and I'm paying a tax. Now, I don't know where the tax money goes, but I know that it goes into certain things that I do use, like public transport or the road that I drive on, or police force, and I don't use the police force, but I do use them without realising it, because they're trying to enforce things so it doesn't affect my life in some way, like crime. So I may never actually have any entanglement with the police. I don't do anything. I never speak to them. Well, do you really want to visit by the police? Probably not. It's probably a good thing you don't. But I'm sure they're doing something, and maybe there's going to be good ones, of course. But your taxes are going somewhere, and there's certain places I prefer they didn't go. But what am I going to do about that? Until a politician can demonstrate a level of maturity to say maybe we don't need this anymore. Now, you're in a country that has the biggest military in the world. Now, a lot of tax revenue goes into that. Now, I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't have one. It's just where do you want your money to go as a country, not as an individual. That's
I kind of wonder this. Well, this is the thing with me. Being a conservative, I want our money to go to the military, but at the same time, I think that our military gets into a lot of needless wars. There's a lot of wars that we shouldn't have been in. I just want money to go in the military so the government can do its fundamental job, which is protect us. And when I say protect us, I mean just that, from outside invaders. I don't mean protect us through like healthcare and stuff like that. Just to clear that up.
Yeah. I think that you're talking about an actual defensive force rather than an offensive one.
Yeah, defensive.
So like, even though it's called the U.S. Defense Force, or whatever. You could argue an aircraft carrier is not really a defensive weapon. Like it transports people all over the globe. It's just like enormous amounts of troops. Navies are very, you have to deploy soldiers. You can't invade a country without actually deploying soldiers. Eventually, you can bomb one, but eventually you've got to get people on the ground, haven't you? You've got to get people down on the surface. And sorry, 1 second, Ben. Thank you. Anyway, the point you're making is you would be quite comfortable with actually reducing the defence budget if it actually reduced its military, like the military aid going through taxes, you wouldn't mind reducing it. And that could easily, not easily, but like I said, if it wasn't getting involved in certain wars elsewhere. Now,
I just don't want us to be the police of the world. I think we should just worry about ourselves.
Yeah, if you think of it, I suppose that I'm not in disagreement with the idea of reducing a military, and there's countries that have done that in ways that maybe seen irresponsible by others, like New Zealand particularly.
Well, I don't want to necessarily reduce military. I want to reduce military action on the offensive side.
Yeah. So, and if you look at Australia and the US have a very positive relationship as allies ever since World War II because of the war that took place in the Pacific, and that's why Australia's always sort of jumped on. As soon as there's been a war, Australia's always,
Australia has an army?
Yeah, believe it or not.
I never hear of it.
Yeah, well, like it was one of the few nations that supported George W. Bush's invasion into,
that's right,
into Iraq.
Yep.
And Australia always has, like the same with Vietnam, same with the first Desert Storm, and it always has. And that's because of that agreed Allied opinion, because of World War II. The US played a big part of because the Japanese attacked Australia. They were on in the Darwin. And
it just seems to me though that the US is the only nation that's like actively in wars all the time.
Yeah, well, I think since World War II that's probably true, and that's what as we all know, and it's probably tired to say it, but that shouldn't be tired to say it because it's important. But Eisenhower's military-industrial complex. So you're talking about we're talking about built-in obsolescence. It's a very good way to profit from war because every time you fire a bullet, you've got to build another one. You drop a bomb, you've got to build another one. An aeroplane gets blown up, well, you've got to replace it. And then you've got rations for soldiers, boots, and then if a soldier is injured, then it's got to be, there's bandages. There's a whole bunch of things that finance around a war where you can profit from it enormously. It sounds very cynical, but there are many people who are in the business of making weapons that when a war comes along, they profit. So if you have an industry that's built around that, which what Eisenhower's concern was, then you might find a country's constantly at war. So people profit from it. It's as simple as that. There are, it is a part of these missiles aren't cheap.
Yeah.
And they're like giant firecrackers, like we're saying about Sydney Harbour and New Year's Eve. So I think it's the problem with a lot of these things. I would say is that like opinion, like we're talking about opinions. It's really ultimately it's opinions that will elect the government because it's the opinions of people who will vote a government in. But what's shaping those opinions? What's shaping our opinions to draw those conclusions?
That's an interesting question because my opinions have changed very little throughout my entire life.
Yeah. So and so therefore, when you look at our opinions, we think, well, I would say mine's changed a lot through my life. So and I've got other friends who would say theirs has changed a lot through their life. Now, and some of those things might be very small opinions, like on things that might even seem a little bit trivial, like you think, oh, I never, or things that were once really important to you, like when you're a child, like, your favourite band that you wrote on your school bag and argued about being the best band. You look back now and think, oh, it's just young and silly, it's a big deal, it's not that important. But at the time, it was a very big deal for you, so your opinion was very strong on that. I'm not saying you, but anyone, or a basketball team or a baseball team. You might have an opinion on something and you can get really caught up on rules over third umpires or referees or whatever, or certain plays or a foul ball and all this sort of stuff, and you have an opinion on it. Now, the problem with opinions, is in using a sports analogy, is that there are umpires on the field. Our opinions don't matter. We don't get to call the shots. The umpires do. So our opinions are dead. We're just spectators. We just watch the game unfold and we think our opinions matter, but they don't. It makes no difference. We don't get to vote on someone's in or out, unless you're doing Twin Galaxies, scoreboards and stuff. But we don't. Then you work as a referee or adjudicator or something. But in the case of politics, you do get, your opinion does matter because you do get to cast a vote. But again, what's shaping those opinions? And again, I talk about this idea of a missing ingredient to create a level of maturity. So what is it that we look at that helps form our opinion? Now, if it's just, just your own opinion, it's self-fulfilling, then that's not very good. Or if you look to sort of, ancient texts like the Bible, and this is what I was, to use the term in the most correct manner, it does beg the question. You say, I look at the Bible because that's God's book, and you say, well, how do you know? And goes, because it says so in the book. And you think, well, how do we know the book is true? Because it is. And you think, well, I'm not being rude to people or Christians, but there's a whole lot of other knowledge in the world that's come about since the Bible, and the Bible's got a lot to offer, but it can't offer everything. Now, it can, if you have a belief in an everlasting soul, it could save your soul if that's your belief, but it's not an instrument to sort of necessarily conduct the behaviour of a 21st century government with all the complexities of how it actually attaches to, how its relationship with other economies and other cultures, and then you look at other things that are, a simple way of putting it is, if you talk to the average person, I shouldn't say the average, when you look at how to put it most simply, any religious person, and not picking on religion, but I'll use that as one example, they scarcely understand their religious texts because they're hard to understand, which is why, and then there'll be someone who's to go, I'm a Christian, that Phil Day's talking nonsense, I understand it. Well, if that was the case, why there's something like, as many as maybe 200 different factions of Christianity? Because they're all interpreting it differently. And each one of them is going to say, I've interpreted it best. So it's hard to get their understanding of that text is very, very difficult because they can't even agree on how it should be understood, because it's not clear how it's to be understood. Yeah. So each one of them scarcely understands the meaning because someone else is going to debate it. And that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But at least have the maturity to acknowledge that. Say, look, I sort of see it this way, but it could be wrong. But they don't. They go, no, I've read it right. I know it's the truth. So when we look at something like your Constitution, when it was written in a time that doesn't necessarily, some of it parallels this reality, but some of it may not parallel our reality today. So it's our understanding of that, as I see coming through media and people I know, there are disagreements on how that should be read and the meaning of those words now. And so when we look at the law, most of us we'd scarcely understand how it really works. But we talk about it like we really know it, really truthfully know it, but we probably don't. I know I don't. Most of the things that go on in life, I don't know the legal ins and outs of it, but I know the general common behaviour, like my, what I would call as my, inner witness guides me in a way that says, yeah, maybe don't push over that old lady, and maybe just put your bottle in the bin, and it's just common sense stuff, maybe don't go into Glenn's house and when he's gone to the bathroom, steal his food out of the cupboard or something. Like, it's just... Actually,
that'd be the last thing you'd want to do, because I actually have a handgun taped to the back of the toilet, just in case that happens.
Yeah, but you know what I'm trying to say, as funny as that one.
I actually had this conversation with a friend the other day, and I told him, if I'm going to get robbed, the last place I'm going to get robbed on is on the shitter. That's why I have a gun in the bathroom.
but that brings up other sort of moral questions, and then it brings up other legal ones, because I know in certain states in the US it's within your legal right to defend the property, with firearms. You're allowed to do that in certain states.
With force,
I think Texas is one of them. Yeah, with force. Now, the law isn't necessarily a guide of moral behaviour. Just because it's legal doesn't mean it's morally correct. Just as ethics and morals aren't the same thing. And people get that confused. What's ethical isn't necessarily moral. They're not the same at all. Morals are more like personal views on something. That's what I morally believe. But ethical things are broader. It's like a shared agreement. Like there's certain ethical practices a surgeon has, certain ethical behaviours. So that ethical, treatment of X is agreed upon. But that doesn't mean you morally agree with it. There's differences there. So the fact that you would shoot someone because they're trying to steal the pumpkin out of your vegetable drawer may not have the moral high ground. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So maybe you're legally within your right to do so, but again, it would take a level of again, I keep saying that, so that ingredient of a missing ingredient to create a sort of level of maturity to say, is it really?
I wouldn't kill the person. I'd incapacitate them. Let's just put it that way.
Even still, I'm not saying I'm I'm just raising the point. I'm not.
I'm a good enough shot. I could pick my target pretty well. I go to the range multiple times a week. I know what I'm doing.
Well,
Most
it'd be kind of
people
like
wouldn't. Most people would just shoot the guy and kill him.
Yeah, it'd be kind of like saying that because a pedestrian steps on the road, and as a car, like if you saw a car making an error and you have the right of way, it's not simple as saying, well, I'm just going to run into them because I've got the right of way, now they're in the wrong. The law might not see it like that. They might say, well, yes, you had the right of way, but clearly you saw this person, like you've hit them in like, you know what I mean? Like it gets cloudy, those areas.
Actually, the U.S. has a law where, like, if you're a person on the street, you have the right of way no matter what.
Yeah. So that's probably the same here. I don't know, but that doesn't mean you can just throw yourself in front of a car and expect them to stop. Do you know what I mean? Like you've got common sense. You would hope common sense prevails here, which is a very foggy area to talk about. Which is why we have juries and we have lawyers to sort of defend us. Like, as much as we may not like lawyers, if I end up in court one day for some reason, I'd rather have a lawyer defend me because they have a greater expert knowledge than I do of it. It'd be a very bright person, to sort of know the law to defend themselves on certain cases today, because it would just, who's got the time to do this? So in a society there is we're talking about before, like social capital briefly there. To sort of unpack a lot of this stuff, it takes a team of people to, teams of people and thousands and thousands of hours of knowledge, and in some cases, thousands and thousands of weeks or months, of knowledge to get to where we are, and we take advantage of that. So, if you want to, there's some things you may be able to see yourself, like you may be able to fix certain parts of your car, great. There's other parts you wouldn't be able to manufacture the bits if you had to. So you have to rely on someone else who's manufactured them there for you. And especially when you get the medical knowledge, like, I'm not an ophthalmologist, I'm not a proctologist, I'm not a vascular surgeon. Like, there's so many things that I don't know about surgery. So I rely on other people. And I'm relying on an institution, like the government, to actually make it possible to find the brightest people in that field of intelligence to make sure that they might find direction into these areas, so we have educated people and with expertise to assist those when they're in need of that attention. Do you sort of see what I'm getting at? So having going back to like our original position here as what I sort of see is that missing ingredient is addressing the required basic needs to assure that we build a society in that egalitarian manner. That's where this originally began. So how do we start to look at these things, like the one that just came up because I sort of mentioned your constitution, the right to bear arms. How do we address that? Now, I don't want to get into that conversation because it's really none of my business, so to speak. I'm not a voter in the US. It makes no difference what my opinion is. But it's certainly an issue in the US, and it's not one that's going away anytime soon. And you look at it and think, well, what's missing here? Now, I don't know what the answer is, but something is missing. There's something missing there to be able to get certain behaviours on the right track when it comes to guns. Now, I'm not saying that you're an irresponsible person with guns. I don't know what you do with your guns, but there are people who like to get guns and shoot up people. Now, and often the argument is, that's because there's it could be, like people say, it's not guns that kill people, it's people who kill people holding guns. And you go, okay, fine. So what's missing there? How are we letting those guns get into the hands of those people? Now, sometimes it could just be, rival gangs, but sometimes it could be sociopaths, or psychopaths, or just nutcases, who knows? But there might be something missing there that could help correct that. Now, I don't know how to begin to do that. I've got no idea. But as soon as a politician who steps up and says something in that manner, let's try and fulfill the basic needs, in this case, that children can go to school and not feel alarmed by the idea of going to school because they may get shot, or people can feel safe that if they go to the cinema that they're not going to get shot, like, that sort of situation. Now, I don't live in the US. I lived there for a very short while, and that could happen here. There's no reason why someone can't mount the pavement with a car, but it's it does happen, but it rarely happens. And maybe that's because, there's certain licensing around having to drive a car. And that doesn't mean someone just can't go and get in one. But you're less likely to have access to a car if you don't have a license to get in one. Do you know what I mean? It's, but it's not foolproof. It's foolish to think that, you can come up with something that's going to prevent any of this from happening. But
and you got to take a test, too, to get the license.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is you're looking at countries that, why is it that some countries have a higher rate of suicide? And you might look at that country and go, actually, there's a country where people have really good education and healthcare and all these things that I'm talking about, but their suicide rate's really high. You think, what's going on here? Or you might find a country that has, a really low suicide rate, and it's the same conditions. You think, well, there's something missing here. What's going on? And it can be a very complicated issue, and you have to look at each one within their own environment. Like, I don't know if I'd assimilate very well into Japan, for instance, because there's cultural differences. I might be a buffoon there. Walking down the street and eating is kind of seen as a bit impolite, from what I understand. I could just walk down the street slurping on a milkshake and eating a hot dog and just look like an uncouth, person. And it would go deeper than that. There'd be lots of deeper issues there where you could instantly offend someone, or certain behaviours that seem unfamiliar. So yeah, like I think that it wouldn't matter what country you're from, is the point I was going to make, and what the cultural differences are. The desire to have basic needs met would seem for me, in my opinion, seems irrational that you wouldn't want them met. I just don't. That seems. I can't think of why, because the very things you have yourself, why wouldn't you want them to be afforded for others? I'm talking about basic needs here. I'm not talking about yachts and Learjets and like opals and diamonds. I'm talking about basic needs. Why wouldn't you want that to extend to other people? And I can say that from living here in Australia and knowing people in the US and certain things, personal friends who have lived here at times and gone back, and people I've met here. And this is just all anecdotal, but where I feel that I would like to see the US have free an education similar to ours, or a completely free one. I would like to see a really solid government Medicare system there, or the equivalent of, there for US people, and same with some sort of form of public housing. But I'm talking about basic needs. I'm not talking about mansions for people who can't afford one. I'm talking about just shelter, somewhere to sleep, somewhere they can call, where they can reside safely. And I find it puzzling, for me that others wouldn't want that for their people. And I think that's where I would see my definition of a social democracy, is when you've got the greater group that, in a democratic vote, the majority would vote for those basic needs for everyone. And that's how I would identify as a social democrat, or a democratic socialist. Sorry. So and that's about tax revenue and a certain amount of government control over affordable education and health and housing. It doesn't limit people from having bigger homes. It's just making sure that everyone has somewhere to live. It doesn't mean that where they live is
I see what you're getting at.
Marble kitchens. Yeah. So so often it's confused as soon as you say social, like, oh, you don't want me to have my Maserati or Jaguar. And say, no, you can have it. I don't care. I don't want one. And I'm not just saying that in a bitter point, where I genuinely don't want one. And and if I did have one, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I just drive it down the shops and get my milk and eggs, or it's not something that it would function in my life in any meaningful way. And that's not to be saying that I have a friend who used to own an auction house, and he's owned more cars in his life than he's had years in his life, and he's had all those cars and driven all of them. And he loves cars, and that's his prerogative. I'm not saying he shouldn't have those cars. But I don't think the government should be supplying everyone with a car. But they should have a public transport service, because people do have to commute in and out of cities and to and from schools and in and out of work. And we can't, if we don't have a public transport system, then it just means that there's just more roads have to be built and more cars and traffic and pollution. Now, it's no surprise that I think that LA once had one of the biggest public transport systems in the world, biggest tram network in the world. And I think, and I could be wrong, but it was like Ford or General Motors, whatever, bought that and destroyed it, from what I understand. Now, that someone can look into the details and that, tell me if I've remembered that wrongly. But it makes sense that they would, because they want people to buy cars. So there's no public interest in that. There was only a capitalist interest. Not everyone can afford to buy a car. So all of a sudden it created problems in a very sprawling city like LA. So you need to have public transport. You know, like, what's the value of a green area in a city? Like a park, like Central Park. How do you put a value on Central Park? Because the real estate's worth billions of dollars, probably $1 trillion more. So do you get rid of it so capitalists can invest on it? Or does it actually have a more inherent value that it's a public space that everyone can share? You know, it's like the lesbian dance class.
Somebody's got to own it, right? Who owns it? The government.
Well, that's right. It's just a public space. So
yes.
There's no cost to use it. You just walk in freely. You just walk in, you can sit there. It's got to be kept and maintained by, I assume, by either, you know, some sort of taxes, whether they're council taxes or state taxes. I don't know what but it's someone's looking after it. Someone's mowing those lawns and pruning those trees and cleaning the large lake at the north end of it. Like, it's all being looked after. I mean, I've been there. I lived there for a short while, and it needs that park, in my opinion. But to put a monetary value on it would sort of miss the point. You know, I wouldn't, and we have a lot of parks in Australia who've taken that very English approach to. So Melbourne's full of, you know, right near me there's a small botanical garden. There's a much larger botanical garden. And they're free to enter and walk around, and they employ a lot of people to maintain them. And there's a few little cafes at the edges of them at least, but there's no way they create enough revenue to support the whole park. But the park has a value that's beyond the monetary worth. It just has its own worth. You know, like it's a place where people can. It's a rest from the city. It's respite from the city. It's a place for people to socially gather. It's a place to take children. It's a place to just relax. There's to see tree. Like, it's, how do you, there's namby-pamby and airy, like, sort of whatever that seems, some tree hugging thing, but it doesn't make sense to put a monetary value on it. It doesn't make sense at all.
And see, this whole thing of, like, parks, in my opinion, doesn't make sense to me as a person that lives in a very rural area and sees nothing but trees and hills and
well, that's right. See, I lived
in
in the country, and there was a park in my town. I never went there, because why would you? I had a big backyard, and there was, huge national parks around me that went for thousands of hectares. Some of them stretched all the way from New South Wales down into Victoria. You could walk these things and never see any sign of civilization, no power lines or anything. Now, so I never went to the park. I just walked through it if I was visiting a friend sometimes, but I never went, let's go sit in the park. I never did it once. There's no interest in doing it. But when you live in a city that's as dense as something like New York or any major city in the world, parks are a valuable place that are used by the people. And to sort of, how do you assess that? It's very hard to get a measure on how they're valued. We just know that they are valuable. And again, it's people like, I think it was Goethe, who really pushed for this idea of the importance of public, a German thinker, it was the importance of public green spaces, and it takes a kind of, and again, it's that missing ingredient. Like, what if you had a city where you don't have that? I've been to cities that don't have that, and they become quite uncomfortable, like cities like Hong Kong, which are incredibly densely populated, have very small parks to the point you can't sit on the grass. It's just to be walked past. You can't touch it, because that many people walk on the grass, it'd be dirt within the end of the day. It's just something you just walk past. It's very hard to touch grass with bare feet in some cities. And you think, well, big deal. And you think, well, for you probably, you can take it for granted because you lived in a rural area and you're fortunate to be able to live in that sort of space and have that space around you. And it swings and roundabouts because other people would say, oh, it's fortunate to live in a city because you've got access to, larger hospitals and larger services like, libraries or, sporting events or whatever your interests may be. You're going to probably find a lot of those more institutionalised ideas in a city than in the country. But in the country, you have a greater sense of freedom in other ways, like physical freedom to just move and make noise. I mean, I'm sure at your place, if you want, Glenn, you could probably go out and slide a bonfire tonight, and,
Yeah, you probably could.
Whereas
Anytime
I don't even
I
have a
want.
backyard in the city. I have a very small balcony, but behind me is a very large park that runs along the river, along the Yarra River. So I have to share my park with other people. But in that space, because I go down there with my daughter, I've got to know locals in there. I don't know where they live, but I know them by name, and I see them in shops. They work in cafes nearby, and I bump into them on the street. And my daughter's made friends at the park. So they're important. If we didn't have that, how would you meet the people around you? Because you wouldn't, they serve as an important function. So I think those are the sort of things that I would see if people aren't voting, and this is why I sort of, and I keep labouring that point, that missing ingredient that might show, so we can be more mature, is that like we look at, like you've got nieces and nephews, Glenn, there would be certain things that you might forfeit to your nieces and nephews because you're more mature than they are. So there's certain things you'll surrender to them, because they can't access that themselves. So you say, oh, look, I can get that for you here, I can do that for you, like it's just what you do because they can't do it themselves. So it's the same sort of situation with, in my idea of a sort of a democratic socialism, is that there are people who aren't afforded the same opportunities that I have been, for whatever reasons, and I'd like them to have those opportunities. And I also see it as a safety net when things can easily go wrong for people through no decision of their own. You could just end up with, cancer, and you shouldn't get treated because you can't afford it, or something like that. I'm just saying, just something. I don't think that's right. Just don't simply think it's right, And also when and the same with certain universities, like I know that, like Harvard is a very, very wealthy institution with something like an alumni of like $1.something trillion or something crazy like that. And it still gets a lot of government grants and applies for them, but it's got more money than it can spend. Now, if it had more of a social, like a democratic socialist point of view, it might actually say, we've got more money than we need. And if Harvard University really believes in the importance of education, then it may say, hey, I shall share some of this because I want people to get an education. So as a teacher, there's no trade secrets. If I know something as a teacher, I just pass it on to my students at no cost. I just happily say, well, I don't own this information. I just pass it on because you believe in the idea of education. So the student that comes into your class when you're teaching English or art or maths or music or history or economics or physics, it doesn't matter. They're passing from teacher to teacher. You don't own those students. You're just trying to facilitate their education and pass on what you know to them so they can receive a better education. So it shouldn't matter what school a student comes from. It shouldn't matter what school they attend. If you believe in it from the idea of a government looking down, and you see all your citizens in all these different schools, you want them all to get an equal, the results won't be equal. Some will just work harder, be naturally brighter or more tuned in or whatever. But you want to look at it and think, well, we won't know that till we test it. So let's just make sure that they're all being afforded an education. You're looking down across there. So if you had all your nieces and nephews sitting out, let's say you had 100, which you don't, but let's say you had 100 out there, and you looked it out there, or even just 10, say 10 nieces and nephews sitting out there, and they're all going to different schools in 10 different states. You'd hope that they're all going to get a good education. And you'd hope if they get sick, they're going to get looked after. But it might be that some of those states are going to get a better education because, or their parents have, can afford them a better education. Now, it's not a case of, fine, I'm not taking away that they can't afford them a better education, but if that better education that's affordable is there and they want to use it, but what's the other one look like that? And the other one might be so poorly funded it's barely an education, or it's barely a health cover service, or it's one that's so expensive that they can't even afford to go into it anyway. Do you see what I'm sort of getting at? I think when you bring it to a much more personal level, it doesn't become so political. So something more topical now, like the coronavirus, let's say hypothetically it is a very, very deadly virus, let's say. We don't know what it's going to do. Maybe it'll be nothing. I mean, it's obviously something, but I don't know what the outcome's going to be. But it's not political. It's not going to sort of only attack Democrats or white people or Protestants or or Republicans. It's just going to get whoever. So who gets treated? Well, anyone who gets it. But if you don't have a maturity to sort of accept that no one deserves to get it, in the sense of like, oh, it's a moral disease. You only get it because God gives it to you or something or other, or because you're a sinner, or I don't know, you broke the law. No, you just get it because, like a virus, you just get it because it's, bad luck. Not there's a such thing as bad luck, but if you have to put it down to something, it's just... And you can do everything you want. You could probably wash your hands with soap and not come in contact.
That's the difference, though, is I'm not paying coronavirus to infect other people.
No, you're not. Yeah. No one is. But what do you do when they do get infected, And that's what I'm saying. To me, a democratic socialist point of view, the majority would say, yes, you can have a certain level of private sector stuff, but we've got to make sure everyone else is looked after as well. Because some people can't afford what's afforded to those, some people can't afford the privately owned, what might be privately owned, what they offer people, they can't afford to buy that assistance. So when a government makes a legislation like that, what's the value of the government? They're not looking after you anymore. If you're one of those people, you think, well, hang on, I just voted for a government that basically I voted for them to hand me the rope to neck myself with, because they're not looking after me anymore. And what I'm saying is it takes the majority to realise that...
You sure about that, Phil? They're pretty... Look at San Francisco, for instance. You can publicly poop on the street while shooting up heroin. They ain't going to say anything to you if you're homeless.
Well, yeah, but I think that's a different issue. I'm not dodging it, but,
that's the government getting involved and telling the police, hey, don't arrest these guys for doing this.
Yeah, but again,
if you walked in the middle of the town square here and put a needle in your arm and took a shit, you'd be arrested immediately.
Yeah. Well, I think that I suppose I'm dodging it in a way, in the sense that it's a whole nother topic. It's a very big thing. And it's a thing that we both lived through, because we were roughly the same age, and we remember the war on drugs, particularly under Reagan. The real want to sort of stamp out illegal, get rid of illegal narcotics. And has it succeeded? I would say no. And how do you address that? How do we again? What's the missing ingredient here? We've tried fighting it. We've tried, like governments have tried to. They've gotten hired departments, drug forces to sort of, to sniffer dogs and all sorts of things to try and, get rid of, heroin and marijuana and everything else in between. And has it worked? And you'd say no. So what do we do here? Do we just keep going the way we're going, like we have been, or do we start another approach? When we look at countries like Portugal and like Holland and the Netherlands, like how they've dealt with it, and they've found that crime went down. So when I was a teacher, to put it simply, I only had a few rules in my class. So if you came to my class, Glenn, the rules were you had to, if it was an English class, you had to sit down and face the front. Pretty basic. I don't care where you sat. There was no ruling for where you sat as a student, as long as it was in a chair behind a desk. You could move from week to week or day to day, whatever. And you had to face front. If you had a hat on, you had to turn around backward. I didn't care if you had it on, but I wanted to see that you were looking up. I didn't want to sort of have a visor so I couldn't see if I had your attention. And the other rule was, if I was talking, I just wanted you to be quiet, or if a student was talking, I wanted you to be quiet so we could hear each other. This is when the class was being addressed. And you could call me anything you like, provided you're willing to say the same phrase about, the same title you gave me, you'd say it in front of the principal or your parents. So if you wanted to call me filthy and you felt comfortable with that was fine by me, or Phil or Mr. Day or, whatever. I didn't mind. It wasn't a big issue for me. And my logic was, the more rules I removed, the less I had to police. Because a lot of them were silly. What do I care for kids chewing gum in class? But it's not an interference to my lesson. And someone go, the kid's going to stick chewing gum underneath the table. Are they? Probably. I don't know. It's just, maybe not. Maybe if you say, look, I didn't encourage them to chew gum, but it wasn't something I wanted to police. So I used to say to students, you're not allowed to chew gum, so if I catch you, you're going to have to put it in the bin. That was the extent of it. I didn't make a big thing about any of it. So it just sort of meant that I could focus on what I really need to be doing. Now that didn't mean all of a sudden they could smoke cigarettes and all this sort of stuff. They're just not allowed to. They're not allowed to anyway. But it was a basic common sense position. So when they got to my class, I didn't care if they lined up to come into class or not. And then a teacher would say, oh, you're making it difficult for us because your kids, don't have to line up in front of class. Well, that's my decision. If you wanted to line up in front of yours, and I tell the students, so when we used to go to the library, I'd say you have to line up because that's what the librarians want. They want you to line up before they enter, so I'd adhere to their rules. And I'd say, you have to call Mr. Updike Mr. Updike because that's what he wants. But you don't have to call me Mr. Day. And some would. Some would call me Sir. One of the students, Michael, his name, he said, Sir, can I call you Sir? Because he was a Year 7 kid, and I said, well, you're the first that ever has. But I don't mind if you want to call me Sir. I don't care. It's nothing to me, I'm there for a purpose, and I got very, very good results. So I didn't see that it affected my, what I was doing. So there's certain laws out there that I think, are they effective anymore? Or are they just becoming a strange kind of self-fulfilling kind of role? Like it's just, you chase this, you do that. You don't really getting anywhere. It's just sort of marching on the spot, treading water. So maybe it's just not working. It's time to change it. And it's whether people are willing to make those changes. Now, I'm not a drug user. I don't smoke dope. I don't smoke cigarettes. I don't even drink alcohol anymore. I haven't for many, many years. So but I don't see the value in, like, it's an ongoing argument here, whether students, well, not students, I shouldn't say students, but it's of course about school, but when they have raves or concerts, they want to have these pill testing places so people can take in whatever pills they've bought, they can test and say, yes, that's safe to take. Just take one, don't take two or whatever. But some people don't want that. They say, oh, no, it's just going to encourage people to take them. Well, they're going to take them anyway, most likely. So then you've got to say, well, how do we educate them not to take them? And you think, well, we do that already in schools. So look, taking drugs, but you can't demonise it either because that's not right. It was like when I taught at a Catholic school once. I was told if a student came to me, it was an all-girls Catholic school, if a student came to me with any questions about abortion or contraception, I wasn't to answer the question, I was to send them to Sister O'Grady or something or other. I thought, that's incredibly irresponsible. Well, Sister O'Grady's a nun. She's never had sex in her life. So what, and she's chosen not to have sex, and she's chosen not to have children. So I think so I thought I can never work in a Catholic school again because I didn't feel I didn't morally agree with what they were doing. Now, that's not to say that I felt that they shouldn't exist. If parents want to send their kids to Catholic schools and get a Catholic education and be in school in that way, then so be it. But I didn't feel comfortable, and no one ever did come to me anyway, but if I was there long enough and someone did, I would say, you have choices, if they were pregnant, and you'll have arguments around abortion and anti-abortion, but that's not my choice to make. These are your options available, There are things you can do because you have those rights to do that. But that wasn't going to be the case here. They were going to be, from a Catholic point of view, you could argue they were being coerced into feel guilty about making what they believe to be a wrong or evil choice, or you could see it from a Catholic point of view, they could be informed about God's love and to do the right thing by that unborn child. Now, that's a moral position, which is built by opinion. But when you bring in like we said before, when you get lots of diverse opinions in a room, and like a duplicity of them, then you've got various ideas floating around, so you can get an adjusted view of this to sort of decide on what you might think is best suited. Then you make a decision. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is the same thing. If you have a basic needs being met on things, then maybe, like you're saying, there's homeless people on the street. Well, what do you want to do with the homeless? I'm not asking you directly, but what do we do with homeless people? You can't just push them out into a paddock somewhere. Is it, why are they homeless? How did this come about? Why is there more homeless people in certain countries than others? And especially a very wealthy country like the US. It's certainly not short of money, and it's certainly not short of space. It's a massive landmass, excluding Alaska and Hawaii.
And it's very diverse.
And it's very diverse, it's a very diverse landmass. So that's not a criticism. That's something that US citizens have to sort of figure out as voters, because I can promise you no government's going to do it there without the voters behind it, because you're fortunate enough to be in a country where, like any other democratic country, where you do get to self-heal through voting. There are countries, fascist dictatorships and things like that, where you don't have a choice like that. You're just relying on the goodwill of that totalitarian, authority to make decisions that best suit everyone. And we've seen that that's not often the case. So we've seen with socialist countries, oh yes, we're going to do this. So when those people get full of the power, like Stalin, they weren't good to their people. It's absolute nasty, man. He's just, nasty to his own people. I mean, I'm not making light of it.
To go back to that Facebook post that you made, I was the very first comment, and I quoted Stalin.
Yeah, but I think you said something like, "I like my freedom," but it's not like, and I say I like my freedom too. So it wasn't me saying I'm rah socialism, but the point is that's not the intended function of socialism. Now that's not an argument for socialism, though.
I said personal freedom.
Yeah, that's right, personal freedom. So I like my personal freedom, but I'm not a socialist. And nor is Australia a socialist country. We're a democratic, we're a democracy. We vote for our leaders. We're not, and when we have private enterprise, it's a capitalist country. There's an enormous amount of private industry here, including private mining, private forestry, private fishery. These are things that you could say are natural resources that not everyone in the country necessarily benefit directly from. Like, Reinhardt, who's one of the richest, for a while there, she was one of the richest people in the world because she just happened to inherit a land in Western Australia, I think it is, that has a whole bunch of, valuable, minerals under it. Now, does that belong to everyone on the continent, or just her because she happens to own a lease on the, should ownership of the land go all the way to the centre of the core of the earth, or should it just be, a metre on the surface? I don't know. There's no legislation on that. So if you're on top of it, it's yours. But, something that took, when you look at things like coal and like fossil fuels, like in Norway, which is a socialist country, I mean, it is a lot of those like fisheries and oil, like they have been called state oil there, like Start oil. It's state oil in Norway, and they have a lot of money, the Norwegian as a nation, and they contacted a philosopher and they said, we want you to help us, let us know what we should do with our money, through the fossil fuels and that we've accumulated all this wealth. And he basically said to them, look, I'm a philosopher. You need to talk to an economist. They know about money. He said, well, we know about economists. We are economists. We know what to do with it. We know what money is, but we just want some help on what is the best things to spend it on. Anyway, the philosopher said, okay, I'll have a stab at it. And he came back to them and said, well, basically, and it was quite a sensible answer, and this is where we get the idea of having opinions and what's shaping that opinion. So he came back and said, well, when we look at it logically, you're using a fossil fuel that took millions and millions of years to create, provided you agree with the idea of a millions and millions of years old Earth. I know there are some people who believe it's only 10,000 years old, so let's just go along with, the sort of more agreed scientific view that could be wrong. I don't want to get into that. But anyway, I said it took millions and millions of years to form. So whatever we use it on, whatever we spend that money on should last a very, very long time, because we're not going to get another go at using that profit again. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that he wouldn't say, I know what we should do. Let's have the biggest New Year's Eve fireworks display ever. Because he would just say, that's insane. So we're digging up something that takes millions of years to get, and you want to blow it up, and then we don't have any anymore. So he was saying, well, build something real with it. Build big, train networks or highways or hydro, plants or I don't know, like it could be, there's so many things like bridges, stuff that build it well, not shabby, build, or use it for education, because then you're investing in your people. So you'd say, that's an ongoing investment. Again, we don't know where it's going to end. So you go, he might have said, take some of that money and fund tertiary education on these subjects particularly. Maybe not lesbian dance, maybe medicine, maybe engineering, maybe philosophy, maybe, but maybe literature, because, literature's spilled into philosophy. Maybe architecture, which is in the arts as well, because the same thing, the aesthetic quality of a house, the size of a house is only important to a point. You also want to know you can live in it. It's like, no matter how good looking a girl is, she may be very, very pretty, but you still got to live with her, and she's boring as hell. I don't think the marriage is going to last long. No matter how good looking she is, people go, oh, that's crazy talk. Well, and it's not being shallow about it. It can go the other way as well. No matter how exciting someone can be, like I've got some very exciting friends of mine who are male, but I'm not sexually attracted to them, and people go, that's so shallow, like what would it matter if they're a man? And goes, well, it matters to me, because I like women. I like the look of them. Do you know what I mean? You know, I like the feel of them. You know, that's being honest. But that's not all they are. That's just one part of it, but it's a big part of it. So I think it's the same with when we say how we invest money. Just building things willy-nilly, only to demolish them again, is futile, because the energy's already embedded in it. Like when they tore the Tiger Stadium down in Detroit. Once a heritage value, but it already existed. You know, it was a shame that happened. And it had a lot of sentimental, nostalgic, you know, it stood for something for a lot of people. And I'm sure there's a lot of people still hurt by the removal of that. You know, that was a place where some people probably grew up, took their families. You know, probably saw Kiss there, you know, and they were out of Detroit, you know. And then you think, well, that's just sentimental, that's just in the way of progress. You think, well, is it progress to remove these things?
I just got to interject and say, my baseball team used to have County Stadium, and they tore that down for Miller Park, and I'm completely glad that they did.
well, you know what I'm trying to say though. Like
County Stadium was a shithole. Like the bathrooms, he had yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah, like what I'm trying to say is that not everything can be measured economically, but there is one thing that's nothing certain, that basic needs. Because we live in a world that's lubricated by money, you know. And if you don't have that money, then you're not lubricated. You can't move through the system. You're just stuck, you know. So if you're not oiled with a certain amount of money, you're just a clot, you know. You're not going anywhere. You're just a car on the side of the highway. You're not going anywhere. You can't pay the toll to move forward. So I think that's something that I see as, and again, I mean, I keep saying this in the same way, but it may be, for me, I feel the missing ingredient of, you know, that could make us a much more mature planet, to put it in a broader sense. There's a level of, like, so Boris Johnson, even, you know, like Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, your Prime Minister, Donald Trump, I don't think they embrace that idea of maturity. And I think a lot of the voters don't. And I think ultimately it'll be forced upon them one way or another. Now, and that's not a threat. I'm just saying you just can't keep seeing the you know, the destitute grow in numbers, and you know, and minimum wages not meeting inflation rates, and housing becoming so expensive you can't even afford to rent it. You know, the French Revolution came about because they just thought, oh, sod these people, just cut their heads off.
I just want to say something about our minimum wage, though. Like, everyone brings that up and stuff. But
well, I'm talking about our minimum wage too. I'm talking about our minimum wage too. You know,
almost every job here that pays minimum wage, they're not jobs that you're supposed to be like either living on or trying to raise a family on.
Yeah. But see, this is where they go in tandem, though. Like, if you don't have an education, you can't move into certain jobs. So you can get stuck somewhere in a role where you can't move out of. Do you see what I'm saying? And if that's where so someone's got to do those jobs, and someone's got to, you know, and if you have a second job in this country, you get taxed more on a second job as well. So it's a bit of a catch-22 when you're sort of towards the economic bottom.
Like the factory that's in my town, right? They employ probably the most people in my area, if you like count like the 2 counties or whatever like that. They're one of the biggest things, and they don't even start you off at minimum wage. You get paid well above minimum wage to do there, and you don't need you don't even need a high school education to do it.
Yeah,
they'll just hire anybody.
No, yeah, look, there's lots of jobs out there. I lived in a town where there was an abattoir, and you can have very good money as a boner, you know, cutting meat from the bone, and you'll just get trained and you make your way up into that situation. And there's union, but Australia's very union, you know, like there's very solid unions here that secure, like as a teacher or as a part of the union, you know, it's very hard not to be a part of the union. You know, well, it's not hard not to be, but it's always on offer, and you're better off being a part of the union in this country. There'll be some people who probably disagree with that, but I don't think many. I don't know what they're anyway. I'm just guessing at that point. But I think that the difficulty of the combination of non-skilled labour, and then, like, I used to wash dishes and I was a store packer when I was a student and stuff, and I didn't mind doing those jobs. But it's very hard to go from, say, a role of like washing dishes to going a high school teacher without a certain education. And being a high school teacher, is not some amazing salary. Do you know what I mean? So it's very hard to go from being a store packer to a surgeon. You know, you have to get an education, or then a store packer to a pilot. You know, there's a certain level of literacy and numeracy skills that's got to get you into these courses to do that to begin with. Now, if you haven't received the level of education to even attain the basic level of literacy and numeracy, you're a long way behind, you know. And as you become an adult, you all of a sudden will take on certain responsibilities, and all of a sudden you just think, well, you just don't have the time in your day to take on these extra things. You know, you know what I'm saying? There just isn't enough time in your life if you've got to work more hours on a minimum wage just to get by. And and it's not good for anyone ultimately. But some people, not everyone can be a surgeon. Not everyone can be a pilot. Someone's got to wash the dishes, and someone's got to do the store packing. And some people are probably quite comfortable in doing those jobs. They don't want to be surgeons. Like nurses don't necessarily want to be doctors. It's not like you failed to be a doctor if you're a nurse. Some people just want to be a nurse. They don't. It's not a hierarchy. It's not well, people see it that way. Like, oh, he's a doctor. Oh, you know, that person's only there. That's nonsense. They're different jobs. They have different functions. So to sort of say, oh, well, this guy's a professor at uni. Oh, that's great. And they say, oh, this guy he repairs TVs or something. And they, oh, that's not. Well, what are we talking about here? You know, like
supply and demand.
But we're talking about it. These are the, you know, like someone's a gardener. You know, some people don't want to be an academic. You know, some people want to go out and they want to herd sheep. You know, people want that job. Some people think of nothing better than, you know, like, I mean, and that's another thing. There comes another point in the idea of a job is that if jobs are fairly meaningless to the person, then they become a chore. But a lot of people like work when it becomes meaningful and they're part of a team. It's like being a part of a baseball team, you know, or something. It feels good to have a role in the team, a meaningful role. But if your role's just to turn up and sit on the bench and you get to play, well, your role's sort of redundant. You might as well be a spectator. So some people get put into sort of jobs where there's not even the reward of working that is so low that even makes it more meaningless, you know. And then the environment you're in, everyone feels the same, you know, like everyone's just there grinding away, and it just becomes, you know, just horrible, you know. Whereas some people, like as a teacher, I liked being a teacher. It was a hard job. Like it was a very demanding job in many ways, you know, emotionally. You know, you're always sort of giving to people, like helping them with problems and stuff, you know. So it's a very giving job like it is for a nurse. But it was certainly rewarding in other ways. Like it was, you know, it didn't feel like I wasn't contributing in some way at all. You know, whereas when I was store packing, you know, it wasn't like I was contributing to, you know, like, you know, people had to get food into supermarkets and I was packing the pallets to go onto trucks. But it was rewarding in the sense that it was good pay. You know, like you're paid well doing that job, so you didn't mind doing it. It wasn't like I got in there and, you know, it was at best it was like a game of Tetris. You know, you were just filling in boxes on pallets because of different shapes. But but it wasn't, and that's not being rude to being a store packer. It's not asking those demands, you know, of you. But those people there then go and become forklift drivers in there, and they become floor managers, and they make their way up, and they can make their way up into H&S stuff, and then they're on really good money, you know, because of the way the union works. So you could, you know, like it's yeah, I think that again it comes down to, like I said, what forms our opinions. And if our opinions are just stuff that everyone who's homeless has just not tried hard enough, or everyone who's homeless has made bad decisions, or everyone who's a drug addict is their own worst enemy, we don't know.
I wouldn't say everyone's like homeless makes bad decisions, but I would say that most.
Oh well,
most poor people have made bad decisions.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Like I don't.
At least the ones that I see and interact.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like I'd have to trust you on that, but I mean that we don't know that. Like I used to be a boys' mentor when I was a teacher, and I used to be the mentor to a lot of foster kids. And those kids have been moved around from place to place, and I used to work alongside with the counsellors a little bit, like the school psychologists, you know, counsellors. And I never got to look in their files because I wasn't privy to it and I didn't need to look in it. But I did get I was informed on certain things, but not details, like descriptive details. But some of the students, and these were like there was kids there in primary school who had been physically and sexually assaulted by the time they were 6 years old, and their behaviour was all over the place. Now, one of the kids I was assisting, he'd been tied to a doghouse and beaten with golf sticks. Now, what do you hope of a child who's only 5 years old who's had that dealt to him by a foster, like by an adult, among other things? Now, and he's good now. Ended up getting the principal's award. He really, but it was a lot of work to get. A lot of effort was put into that child in a public education, which is where I was working in a public school, so it was government funded, to assure that this kid got the best education possible. But it meant giving him a lot of extra rope. Like he behaved in a manner that wasn't appropriate for everyone else. And some kids would go, well, why does he get to do that? You think, well, you don't know his background. He's had a very different upbringing to you. And so you have to have a little bit more level of maturity. This was the senior students you talked to. So you have a little bit more maturity to understand that that child hasn't the same, personal history as yours. Like, he's had it very tough already. And that doesn't mean he's not trying to deal with it. You just got to sort of at least acknowledge that some people have had a very, very bad start in life. And that needs extra attention. So in schools in Australia, that's probably the same in the US, but you get kids who have got certain cognitive disabilities, like whether it be sort of further on the autism spectrum, or could have a Down syndrome and things like that, but they'll have a teacher's aide. Now, not everyone gets a teacher's aide, and not everyone needs a teacher's aide. But you get someone with some severe Tourette's or something or other, and they do need a bit more personal assistance. And eventually, as they go through school, sometimes that personal assistance drops off. And often, you even have a school, you have a curriculum that's more, they're off the curriculum in many ways. They're on their own driven curriculum. They're not doing this, they're doing the same work, but there's not an expectation of them to fulfill the work at the same level, because you know that it's not, they just can't. It's like asking someone, a quadriplegic, to swim 50 metres. It's just a cruel request. They just can't do it.
So they could float.
Well, but they can't. Well, even then, some of them can't. Like you like a quad. Like you know my point though. They can't. You can't ask. Yeah. Well, it's like asking someone with no legs to
well, yeah, you're not going to get them to do a breaststroke. No. They just float like a raft, though.
Yeah. Well, that's slower. Then asking a paraplegic to run a marathon, they just can't do it. So it's the same emotionally. It's not that these people don't want to learn, or not. They don't. It's not that people don't want to be good people. Like I see good in this. I'm using this in a very sort of general sense. Or people in society, but they're not necessarily ready to do it. They're not in a position to trust so that kid, when he came in, he didn't trust adults, and he had no reason to. He'd been treated like crap the whole time. And if there's no safety net, and he had one, he ended up in a very good foster family in that town. And a very loving one, and he was in a school that was, there was me and a couple of other teachers, another couple of male teachers there, who really, assisted him in various ways. Like it takes a level of understanding to do that. And it's not easy for some people to go against their own opinion. What's forming that again? That's again what's forming this opinion, and it's like I think it's William Blake who said, an unexamined life isn't worth living. So eventually you got to look at yourself and go, well, why do I have these thoughts? Is it because my dad told me this years ago, or is it because that's what I was told in school? Therefore, it must be true. Is it because of what that's just the creeds of the tenets of the culture I live in, so it must be true. Eventually you go, no, I don't think I agree with that. And when we look at these, like going back to what we said, like the Voltaires and the Paynes and the Benjamin Franklins and these sort of guys, they went, no, I don't agree with this, actually. I think there's some better ideas we can come up with if we put our heads to it. And that's what a lot of revolutionaries do. And you're a country that's born out of revolutions, like offshore before they even arrived there, like what was happening in Europe at the time, it sort of got imported to there, But again, like they were English and French and Spanish people there. And, and eventually the settlers got rid of all of them. But they also came with a whole bunch of pilgrims who were incredibly conservative people, so conservative they left Europe. The Europeans didn't even want them there. So that stayed as well. So some of the opinions are formed by that, just as it is in this country. A lot of our opinions here are formed by, you could say, to some people, it's outdated modes of thinking that there's already other countries that have moved on and beyond it. Now that's again, there's no fact in that. There's no even truth in it. It's just again, that's where people's minds are at now. Now, not everyone's, and it's fine if you resist it, so long as you can resist it without anything. But my suggestion would be to at least resist it with some sort of informed view that shaped your opinion. I'm not saying that to you, Glenn. I'm saying that to anyone who may listen to this, and that's just how I look at it. And then there's many things, like it's another way of looking at it, I suppose, Glenn, is remember when we were in school, like, you think of something like way back in kindergarten, and, when we first started school. Now, when I was in kindergarten, I would have known all the names of the kids in my class. Now I can't remember all their names anymore because I've just forgotten them. I just don't remember their first. And someone like, oh, do you remember? Just make up a name. Do you remember, Ian Smith? And I go, no. And goes, the kid with the red hair. And goes, no, I don't remember him at all. And they show you a photo and go, oh, yeah, I vaguely remember him. What happened to him? Did he? No, he was in the next. You just don't remember it as well as you once did. Just as you might remember all the lyrics to a song and you just forget about it, or whatever, or an old telephone number. You once knew it off by heart, or the combination number for a lock, for your bicycle, and you used to know it and get it out every day, then you forget it. Now, I remember, so the person back then, I don't remember the same things I did when I was a kid, so you could argue the case I'm not the same person I was as a kid. I'm certainly not the same height. My age isn't the same and my knowledge has grown, but there's certain things I don't even know anymore that I once did know. Now, I'm not saying legally I'm not the same person just because I don't remember something, but my opinion's been formed by other things. Things have changed. The importance of things has shifted. So when you're a parent, it might shift some more. You start to focus on things that you're more concerned about what your child may or may not get. Or I don't know, like something comes up like coronavirus, because that's happening, and all of a sudden your opinion starts to focus on things you once didn't worry about so much, like you go, I better sanitize my hands, I don't want to get this, or you just think, I don't think it's that serious, so you don't worry, whatever. But it starts to shape. But if you live in a echo chamber, I'm not saying you, anyone, and you're only surrounded by people with the very same opinion you already share, then you're very unlikely to assess your opinions unless you make the effort to actually go and read other things and go to other countries or look at what other countries are doing, or look at other, like.
And I think this is a genuine problem with society too, is people living in these bubbles.
Oh, definitely.
But go on.
That's not. Yeah, and that's not a political, like it's Democrat, like in your country, it's the Democrats, it's the Republicans, it's the Libertarians, it's the, like I think you're saying the other day, the Voluntarism, what are the ones, you got your
there's so many different.
Yeah, but you got your constitutionalists who just believe in the Constitution, that's their
That'd be like libertarians.
Yeah, that sort of, and you think, well, that's all fine, but are they even listening to each other anymore? Now, so I think a good example here, we talked about it before, is political correctness, and that's a good example where you see those polar views, very, very different views, on political correctness. Now, I'll say, like talking about egalitarian views, I'm all for political correctness when it addresses egalitarian issues, like basically civil rights and human rights, all that sort of stuff. And I'm not just saying it, like I don't have an issue with any of that stuff. Like if someone's going to go, I don't see why women should get the vote. Well, of course they should. I don't see why they should get equal pay. If they're doing the same job, they should get the same pay. It's as simple as that. I don't have an issue. That's just an obvious example. Now, and then the thing is, though, is from the authoritarian political correctness, I don't like. I don't have. So when someone sort of feels like, if there aren't enough women as CEOs in the world, there are more. Say there's more men who are CEOs and there's less women. People say we should correct that. And you go, well, if there's demonstration of some unfairness in a certain job interview, then that should be corrected. You could sue. There's lots of things you could do there, but you'd have to demonstrate that, because I could promise you that no one who's going to want a job as a CEO is just going to roll over and let someone else take the job from them. So men aren't going to say, oh, well, I'm going for the job, but so is Glenn, but I'll just let him have it. You know, if you're at that level of management, you've probably had your eyes on the prize of being a CEO your whole, for a very long time, and you're not going to give it up so easily. That's what I think anyway. I'm no CEO.
Especially when the guy probably earned that spot, and the other person's just like, give me that spot because I filled this check mark.
What are you saying? Sorry, I misunderstood that.
Like the CEO, that if somebody came in and wanted to give his job to fill in, like you said, why isn't there more women? And if they just mandated this guy can lose his job because he's not a woman, even though the guy earned that position, like that's not very fair.
Yeah, no. What I'm saying is, I'm being a bit. I'm being a bit. Choosing women here is a very, very risky. Interpret what I'm saying. So I'm suggesting women should be CEOs. What do you think CEOs? She manages, and her boss is a CEO. And she's a woman. Her CEO of the company's a woman, and my wife earns far more money than I could ever earn. So I'm not suggesting women shouldn't be in management at all. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm not saying that's what you're suggesting either. All I'm saying is that, that just because we may want something to be corrected, it's not as easy as that. Like you've got to, if the playing field's fair, then there's no reason why women shouldn't get to the top, or men for that matter, or anyone. Wouldn't matter what ethnicity or religious beliefs you have or anything like that. If you can demonstrate you're good at that job, like I think the current CEO of Google was a guy from India. He may still be there, and I think they brought him in from India because they wanted him. So it seems to me that they're just trying to employ. But I think it's a man that is. I don't think it was. Why is that the case? I don't know, but I'm sure he's on a very good salary to be the CEO of Google. Now, I don't think that to say that he got the job and he's a man's unfair. If they've looked as far as employing somebody in India, how many people did they apply for that job, or did they approach to take that job? I have no idea. I don't know. My point is that having a right for people to do that, but then creating a situation where you sort of can assess that a panel is being fair to its applicants. I don't know how they begin to do that, but I'm pretty sure they do. Sorry, just 1 second. Just waiting for someone, mate. Do I need to move or? So should I move or do you? Yeah. Oh, cheers, mate. Sorry. Just got a parking attendant coming over, and he said because I've been sitting here talking, but it's not going to be fine. So I'm sitting here. But he said if I just move my car, I'm all right. So I just moved to another car park. So there you go. I just thought I should have just got the fine, shouldn't I? Like Glenn, if I was a real socialist. Are you still recording this, Glenn?
Yeah.
Working? Yeah.
We've gone on for about 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I better go. I should let you go soon, but I think that I'll finish on this point. I think that again, to address. I don't know how much this has been as much as about democratic socialism, but more my approach as to why I'd see myself in favour of a government that had an aspect of that in it.
That's ultimately what I want to learn is about people and then
So when I look at that, and you apply it to something that's more, you could say, a code of ethics and then a moral view. Is I saw this Ricky Gervais tell a joke to Jerry Seinfeld. I think I might have mentioned this to you the other day on that comedians in cars getting coffee or something or other. This is a while ago. And Ricky Gervais tells this joke where, and it wasn't his joke. He said he got it from someone else. And it's a very clever joke. It's a Holocaust. Someone from the Holocaust, like when it was a Holocaust survivor, eventually dies and goes to heaven. and he tells this joke about the Holocaust, and everyone, there's people there's present, of course, God, who's omniscient, omnipotent, omniscient, he's there, and or it's there, however you word it, and after he tells the joke, God says, I didn't find that very funny at all, I found it quite offensive. And the Holocaust survivor says, well, I guess you have to be there. Now, the point is about political correctness in many ways. Like, of course, God would have been there, but he didn't do anything about it. But, so what right is he to be offended when he didn't try and do anything? Now, the point here is that, if you take something like humour, is that it's, to interpret something in the most negative way possible to get the maximum amount of offence in something is what I think some authoritarian politically correct people do. So they take it to the extreme, and you sort of think, like, this is in humour, which is where I think the political correct debate often can happen in a really aggressive manner. And you sort of think, well, it's a joke, but I took that really offensive, because and you think, like, there was a joke that came in Australia recently. There's this cartoonist, his name's Michael Lunick, he's been around forever, and he did this joke, and very much liked, and he's sort of this, I don't know where his political stance are, but you get the feeling that he's kind of a liberal-minded guy and that, whatever. He did this joke about, I don't remember the whole crutch of the joke, but it was basically saying that there's, people pushing prams with kids in it, while the parents just staring at their mobile phones. They're not having any kind of real face-to-face time with their child, and they're not involved in their child's life. That was but I can't remember the catch, right? Like the line to it or the joke, but you get the gist of it. There's a drawing of a parent, and he drew a picture of a woman pushing the pram, and he just got a whole bunch of backslash, from people, not everyone, but people saying it's not fair because you're saying that mothers aren't good mothers, but he was either a man or a woman you put there, but they sort of took it to the extreme. It was more of a comment on parenting, not gender as such. But there was people who wanted to take an extreme level of offence, beyond the joke into a territory of this is this is the limit of the possibility of where I could be offended most, and they become experts at being offended, and want to have an authority on things that it's not really possible to have an authority on. And you sort of think, what's forming your opinion here? It seems that what's forming their opinion is they want to, they're offended on things where others aren't. So
yeah,
you sort of think this isn't like mixing the colour green, where we go, if we put blue and yellow, we will get green. Some women aren't offended by that and just go, well, I get it, because I do see mothers do that. I see men do as well. It's just a parent, it's more about technology than it is about women, but they're making it about women. You see what I'm trying to say? So they're sort of, it's not about women as it's about being a parent, and with current technologies that a lot of parents you see them looking at their phone, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a reminder, maybe spend some more time with your child, for some who may be a bit more addicted to phone usage. Now, you can sort of see where this gets into sort of grey territory, but it does sort of show where our distractions lie. So, it's a really scary thing to say, but for me anyway, but I'll say it regardless, I'll just say it, that you'll see cases, like there was one here in Australia long ago where a woman was getting a photograph with a colleague, and then she took this man to court because in the photograph, when they're getting a group photograph, he put his hand on her bum. Now, I don't know all the details of that. Now, I'm not saying that's appropriate or like if it's her body, they've huddled together for a photograph, and if it was inappropriate, then that's not good. But then at the same end of that, like I said, when I was doing boys mentoring stuff, and we see it, there are children out there who are being raped, and they're making, heinous, pornographic films on some sort of strange black market, like really horrible stuff. Yet this is the sort of stuff that can actually dominate a lot of media attention. Now, I'm not saying therefore those women don't have a right to complain about this, but it's where do we form our opinion on where does sexual crimes begin and end? Now, because it's not for me to, so anyway, and then this isn't an apology for that, but it's women, and it's their body, they're women, and I guess in it's for them to decide. So it's like sort of saying that my name's Phil, and if you want to call me Frank, and I say, well, I don't want you to call me Frank, my name's Phil, Glenn, and you go, I don't care, I'm going to call you Frank. This is a really bad start to a conversation, isn't it? You're insisting on calling me something I don't want to be called. So it'd be the same as like someone saying, I don't want to be called, Mrs. I want you to call me Ms. I don't like the term Mrs. because I find it has a political connection to marriage and ownership, and I don't want to be called that. Okay, I'll call you Ms. You go, well, I'm going to call you Mrs. anyway. You think, well, this is a bad start. So it's the same as Native Americans. If they want to be called Native Americans and not American Indians, I think that's their choice. They should have that decision. And any woman has a position to say where they do and don't want to be touched. That's their. I think that's well within their rights. I agree with that. Just as I don't want to, I should have that decision too. But on the same token, there's a level of. I don't know what the level is. I don't know how you gauge it. But when it comes to things like humour, like in that one, how much. What crime has really been committed here? And the same as if someone in a photograph put their hand up, it's certainly inappropriate. If that was known, they shouldn't be doing it. But to what? I don't have an answer to this, so I could imagine popping a lot of flack for saying it. But to what level of exposure and media attention, and you know what I mean? It can be it's very hard to talk about it because it sounds really wrong what I'm saying, but where's the authority on where someone's hand on something? See, if I was getting a photograph with some girl, I put my hand around, because they put their hand around mine, and my hand was around the hip, and I had it a bit too low. Where does the bum and the hip begin? Now, maybe he was groping her, really, I don't know. But I'm just saying the authorities on these things get very, very peculiar when you actually join in and say, yes, let's have a group photo, and you all huddle up, and then someone puts their hand in a spot. Now, that's not... If he did grab her right on the bum and all this sort of stuff, then that's clearly wrong. But it's a very, very... authorities that haven't been explored yet, and now it's a new thing. And again, it's one of those things that what's the missing ingredient here, the level of maturity? Now, the person putting their hand on someone's ass certainly knows that they probably shouldn't do that. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a wrong thing to do. But on the same token...
There's laws against it.
Yeah, there's laws against it. You've also got these laws that come in that once didn't exist, but there's good reasons why they come about. But as that extends out further and further, is it wrong to make a joke about certain things? Is it wrong to not agree with something? Like if I say, I don't like the Quran, or I don't like the Bible, or I don't like the Old Testament, and go, oh, that's politically incorrect. Because no, it's not of interest to me. I'm not stopping anyone else from reading that. It just I don't approve of it. So when a girl says, oh, I was in the same photograph and he grabbed me on the bum, I didn't say nothing. Well, that doesn't make it right either. Just because it didn't offend you doesn't mean that someone else shouldn't be offended when they are. So this is all very, very confusing area, I find. Not the right and wrong thing here, but how do you... this guy was facing certain jail time. I don't know what the outcome was, so it's not really fair that I talk about it in such a casual way. I'm just trying to sort of highlight how these things have been slowly coming, because there have been people mistreated in the workplace and so on and so forth, and there's various cases of it, and of course it's been in the media recently, but the politically correct view I have of that egalitarian view is that people should be able to know that they can go to a workplace or any environment and feel that they're as safe as the next person, physically, sexually, they should be able to dress in their religious garb and not be spat on or harassed or refused entry and all that sort of stuff. Fine. But to sort of expect that I now have to agree with the outcomes of certain things or agree with their ideology is a different thing. Do you see what I'm trying to say? So just because I might say, oh, if someone put their hand on my bum, I wouldn't care. That's just my opinion. That doesn't mean that I have an authority on that, and then I'd say, then therefore you shouldn't care. Do you sort of see what I'm trying to do?
Yeah, well, everybody's different.
It's very... Yeah, that's right. So these are things that, so it happened recently, I think, in the media in the US, where there was a politician who sent a nude picture to a mistress or something or other. Does it sound familiar?
Yeah, you're talking about Katie Hill in California?
Yeah, no, that's what
she had a bunch
it was a theatre actor or something?
I'm not
Was
for
there a theatre actor?
I'm
Yeah, I
the
think.
last one I know of is Katie Hill, and she was the one that somebody leaked a bunch of pictures of her nude with like I don't know,
Oh,
some really
no.
creepy photos. Like she
Well,
was
well, well. No,
nude,
this was a
while the other
no. This was a
girls.
guy.
Okay,
This was a man, and he was. I think he was a theatre actor or some other actor. And he sent, and he was. I think he was in a relationship or he was married. I can't remember. And he sent a nude picture to another girl, and his partner or fiance or wife, whatever it was, she said that she felt that what he did was wrong. That you know, that was that. And I think they split. But a whole bunch of other people got behind it, got up against her because she didn't sort of see her sort of saying, that she'd forgive him or whatever was wrong. Because they made a big issue, like what he did was really inappropriate, but he sent this photo to this girl, and I don't think that, I think there might have been some messaging back and forth. But could you imagine how many nude photos are being sent around the world at any given time,
yeah,
And to sort of say that it's, do you know what I mean? Like, so there was an authoritarian view that this girl shouldn't be, that she shouldn't feel that what he did was, that she shouldn't forgive him, or I don't know the ins and outs of it, but you could, and therefore it looks clumsy of me not to know all the details. But the details, we can create fictional ones here, and it's still going to come down to a moral position of how you feel about these things, because it ultimately is about feeling. Like, it's sometimes like it's not like in that cartoon. Really, it's not what the cartoon said and how it was said. It's how the viewer felt, and you have no control over how the viewer feels. Do you see what I'm saying? So in a social environment, if me and you were hanging out, and I could do something that you said. It's not so much what he did or what he said or how he said it. It's just how it made me feel, and you don't have much control over that at all. But you can certainly have control over equal opportunity. So what I'm saying is I'm a bit scared of politically correct authoritarians, because I don't know how you can actually have a strict authority over that. You can have you can say that we have certain roles here where, a workplace, this is inappropriate and that's not inappropriate, like clearly, what I mean? There are fairly obvious things like going around grabbing people on the bum is inappropriate. And in a group photo, that also would be inappropriate, But there would be times when, there are people who touch each other's bums regularly, and it's appropriate because there's an agreement there. Now, what I'm saying is that it's a hard thing to talk about because it's going to sound like, yes, I'm not getting into any territory where, yes, sometimes we know, I don't agree with that at all. It's a very, very authoritarian, politically correct views. It's what's forming that opinion is often just, I don't like it, It's not whereas the egalitarian
what
one is
harm is it really doing to you? I mean, words.
Well, yeah. So there's like I said before, if you want to, we'll use the word like the N word and the F word that's used for gays, and the N word used for people with dark skin or brown skin, or whatever the correct term might be. I think it's for them to decide whether that word's appropriate or not. It shouldn't be for us to decide. So it shouldn't be for men to decide what's appropriate for women. It should be for women to decide. But the same token as, at what point...
How do you stop that from getting out of control, though?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So you sort of got to say, well, at what point do you sort of feel comfortable with that sort of authority? Like you think, well, hang on, it's very difficult. So what I'm saying is that on a broader sense, we can have this sort of, like I was saying, for the even ethical view of, non-bigoted, this, that, and the other, all the things that we've already talked about, and saying, there you go. Like, if doesn't matter what religion you should, like you said, here's a cafe, gay, like a public place, a park, gay, straight, Muslim, Christian, dark skin, pale skin, red hair, blonde hair, whatever, tall, short, able-bodied, disabled, but you're all welcome, and you come. And you make it as best you can in a democratic social way. Like, we'll even have ramps and this, that, and the other, and shady areas and all that. All the things that make it comfortable as you possibly can make it. That's fine. You say that. There it is. Now, when someone goes, I'm offended by, I don't know, like, a flag in the park. It's the American flag. And they go, I don't like the American flag because I don't like the American government. You think, well, mate, that's a problem you've got. Like, you're living in the United States. Surely you're going to have to expect to encounter the American flag. Like,
Yeah.
we're not going to remove it. Like this is the country you live in. You can't, or someone, going in and saying, oh, I went in the park and I heard someone speaking Italian. I don't like it. So, well, that comes part and parcel with a multicultural nation. Like, you can't expect us to make, if you're going to have a sense of diversity, you are going to hear people speaking in Italian because we have Italians here. You're bilingual people. Well, but this is a predominantly English-speaking nation. Everyone should have to. Well, it doesn't work like that. That's fine. You can't be offended. You can be offended. Fine, you don't like it, but we're not going to change it. We can't change that, but we can do things like, that person came up and grabbed me on the bum. So, yeah, we can do something about that. But my concern is when that gets drummed into something. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be policed, but people can get very sidetracked by. Because it happens, in some cases in some sort of, I'm not saying they're not a victim, but there are certainly very, very serious things going on in the world.
Well, you don't want that, like that bum reference. You don't want it to get so out of hand where it's like, okay, now you can't touch anybody's bum, even if they do like it.
Well, yeah. I suppose a more obvious example, which is probably much more easier to talk about, would be, in many ways, when Donald Trump complained about a foreign film getting the Oscar, at the Academy Awards. Well, who cares anyway? It's
their
club.
Just
films.
It's their club. They can fucking pick whoever the hell they want.
Yeah, and it's just film. It's not like they're just all these people are earning good money. All the actors, like, good on the South Korean film Parasite, but I don't care. Like, this is not. For me, it shouldn't even be an issue that a president not having got Trump should even be concerned about. When you think of what's going on in the world, is that a top concern? Who gets the Oscar? I wouldn't have thought so. I wouldn't have cared less. It doesn't make any sense. Who cares? It doesn't matter. When you've got the sort of things that are going on on the planet at any given time, you really want to draw that much attention. That's all I'm saying. If someone gets touched in the bum, that can be dealt with, but very sensibly, and the person could be fined or whatever the case may be, or lose his job or whatever. Is it of national interest? I don't think so. So some of these politically correct issues of authority, like a cartoon that someone finds offensive whereas someone else doesn't, and you think, well, this is just one person's opinion in the end, and then but it's also the newspaper's opinion. Go, well, not entirely, because he's a part of the editorial decision. Like, when you're a cartoonist, you're a journalist you're not illustrating, you're coming up with the article. That's that person's opinion, and we've published it. But if you had a style manual for a newspaper that said we're now going to use the N word and the F word to describe these groups of people, I think that's just inappropriate. You say, well, now we're getting to an area where this is a whole group of people. This is a whole. This is not. You're narrowing in on it. Like, well, there are only two genders. There are male and female, and of course there's hermaphrodites and stuff. But someone has to be pushing that trolley in that picture. And I mean, this is a really difficult thing to talk about because it's so hard to navigate through this stuff that I can't even begin to understand it. And that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to political correctness when I'm not. I feel there's a measure of that, like I keep saying, that broader sense of making an even, comfortable environment for people to be accepting of difference. But when it comes down to like a single individual saying, I'm offended by that cartoon, and a few other people are offended by it, and it's because, and it's someone, like a joke that seems, what I would see as relatively I'd see it as harmless, and so I'm looking at the most extreme examples in that case where people push the joke they push the something to the most extreme level to be offended, whereas someone getting grabbed on the arse is an offence, clearly, but it's not, and they should be offended, and they should be able to pursue that in whatever legal means they feel necessary, but to see it for some much bigger than what it is, which is, it's still wrong. I'm not saying these are the same, but if someone stole if if I had a backpack and I was on a train and someone stole it, I'd go to the police if someone stole my backpack, and they go, oh, well, what we can do is this, that, and the other, and they caught the guy, and I got, whatever. Is it, it's a crime of theft, but is it as, sort of, I'm not saying the same thing, but I'm not trying to talk down someone's personal body isn't the same as a property like a bag. I'm not saying the same thing. It's just, I think there's a level of, again, like what ingredient here is what possible ingredient is missing to show a level of maturity here. So I'm not saying the girl in this case shouldn't have gone to the police or anything, whether her boss or whatever the situation was. I think if she felt that she should, that's fine. And if someone finds offence to something like a cartoon, you still there, Glenn?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah. That's fine. But with the cartoon one, you can easily just move away from it. Whereas the girl getting grabbed on the bum, there's not much you can do there. She's been intruded on.
Yeah.
Now, someone say, so for me, I feel it's the difference between the girl.
The girl's physical. The other one's.
Yeah.
I mean,
Here's the best way, since we're talking. The best way I can come up with it's the difference between someone coming up and saying, "Are we going to swear in this program, Glenn? I don't want to swear if you don't want me to."
I don't give a shit.
Okay. Then. So it's like sort of saying, if someone comes up and goes, "You're a slut," to some girl, right? I can see that they're offended by that, and they've just been they've been verbally abused, and they'd say, "I don't need to take them. This isn't a workplace." They have every right to go and see their boss and say, "I found that really offensive." But when someone at workplace goes and gets a dictionary and looks up the word slut in a dictionary and then opens up the page and goes to the boss and goes, "I find it offensive that this is in the dictionary," and goes, "Well, who told you to go looking for it?" Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like, I'm going to go find all the dirty words in the dictionary and then write a letter to the Oxford, Oxford publishers of the Oxford English Dictionary and say, how dare you have all these dirty words? I've underlined them all. You think, you've gone that far out of your way to be offended? That's amazing. It's kind of weird. Whereas the girl didn't go out of her way to get grabbed on the bum at all. And she went and did all the, she went to the police, but somehow the media got hold of it and have turned it into a much, much bigger story. It's deserving of political justice, legal justice, whatever that is. Like in that case, I don't know what the outcome of that would be, really. Yeah. And that could be a large fine or it could be some in prison. I have no idea. And whatever it is, then she has every right to pursue that if she's been assaulted. But here I'm talking about the media's responsibility to drum up something that can overshadow what I would see as much more significant issues when you've got really, really, really heinous crimes going on. Really, and I think anyone who wants to compare being grabbed on the bum to the raping of children is delusional. I don't think they're the same thing at all. Both are wrong, but I think there's a degree of difference there. I don't want to argue that, but I intuitively feel that there is. I just don't think that, I don't think anyone who's going to get grabbed on the bum is I think you'd have to have some, you'd be I think you'd have to be a little bit unstable if you couldn't actually operate in the world again because of something like that. But I could easily see how a child who could be raped may never be the same person ever again, And I think this is where, the sort of stuff that I hear about political correctness from friends of mine, and again, this is anecdotal, but one person who's a friend of mine who's an academic, it's now inappropriate to, if we were at work together, and I don't know if it's for same sex or different sex, but let's assume different sex. If I was an academic and I was at this place and I turned to some fellow staff member and I said, "Hey, Janice, do you want to go and get a coffee?" I said, "Yeah, okay, let's get a coffee and talk about what we're doing." That's fine. But if you say, "Let's go get a coffee, I'll meet you at such and such cafe," and that cafe's off campus, that's now inappropriate. And you sort of think, how's that? They're both adults. Surely they can come to understand, their own feelings about this. Now, I've got a friend who's a farmer. If you jump his fence and you walk onto his property and hurt yourself, he could be held responsible because it's a workspace you've entered, and he's, and now that's got nothing to do with political correctness. But you sort of think, what forms these laws, and they're opinions that do ultimately. so getting back to where we started, and then I should let you go, but because we've been talking a long time, but ultimately we voted in these legislations, governments to form, we are the opinion that forms a government. And what sort of things do we want to form that? And I certainly want one that's very much a society that can move as close as it can to some sort of, utopian ideal, which you're never going to get there, but something that means that people feel safe and respected and free to exercise their, various human rights and civil rights, what they are, that's that. And I feel that the lubricant for that in a society that we both live in is one of the capitalist interest. So therefore, money's going to help assist that in many ways. In many ways it will. Strangely, you'd think that it won't, but it will. Like sort of things we talked about, like education and medical aid, even legal aid, in the topic we're talking about at the end there. So therefore, but it can start to drift into areas that, do you really want these? There's certain things. Do you really want to police them? Do you really want to sort of move into these authoritarian views? Because I don't know if there's an expert on. Can you be an expert on what it means to be a best friend? I'm a best friend expert. I'm a relationship expert. I'm an expert on how to forgive people. Like, I don't think there's an expertise on that. I don't. No, so therefore, you can't have to have an authority on it. Doesn't make sense. You can have guidance on it. Fine, and that can come from friends and all sorts of people. So again, an authority in a legal sense, again, some legal people say, "Oh no, you can pursue this, but it may not be worth your time." Someone else may say, "Let's pursue this because you've really got a case," and I don't want to spend any time in court if I can at all. I want to get on with my life. Yeah. Now, again, it's a very, I don't know if I've made my point very clear there, but I think that political correctness does touch on democratic socialist interests. It's not a because political correctness is very much about not just letting big fish eat little fish, so to speak. So a lot of things that rose up out of those movements, those protests, like feminism by far has been the most successful philosophy of the 20th century, by far. And it needed to happen,
It depends. Like there's a couple different forms of feminism. I think that there's one out there that's complete garbage, and then I think that there's one that's does actually care for women. So. Yeah.
Well, I don't know what the two different ones are. I mean, I know of one that's about the various rights for women. There's ones that I find agreeable, but you must have another one that
well, I would say the one that I think is garbage is the one that thinks that women are completely equal to men, like physical everything they can do, while ignoring like the things that they're not as good as doing. Like, take for instance weightlifting. Men are just naturally built. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
And then there's feminism where they do want equal things, but not. They see that men and women aren't created equal.
Yeah. Well, I think that. That's just getting into sort of.
That's just really basic.
It's kind of, that's like wanting equal rights. That's like wanting equal rights for height. Tall and short people. Yeah, you've got equal rights. But when it comes to basketball, you might find it hard to get on a team unless you're a remarkable basketball player. And there have been very short basketball players who have been remarkable players. But by and large, height is an advantage if you're going to be a basketball player. You're going to find more tall people on basketball teams than very short people. And that's not... Someone could say that's discriminatory and go, yeah, we are discriminating on height because these guys are the better. They can, for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And then to sort of argue away, it's like men trying to argue their way into a Miss Universe or something. That's probably or a better way of putting it is
we ain't far off.
Yeah, but men wanting to try and argue their way into. It'd be like sort of having a women's swimming pool. Only women can use. I'm not opposed to that. That women should feel comfortable to be able to go swimming because they might feel body conscious and they might feel that men don't. They just feel watched or whatever. I don't mind. Women, having a women's swimming pool that men don't go to. I don't see that as an infringement. I'm like, because there's other pools I can go to anyway. It's like having separate toilets. There's a reason for that. That's not sexist. It's sexist in the sense that that's a women's toilet, that's a men's toilet, but it's not disadvantaging. You just go to the men's toilets. Why would you go, I want to use the women's toilets? Well, you don't need to, So, yeah, I mean, that's different. I don't know much about that sort of. I'd say that I don't even know if that fits in accurately to what the dominant cause of what feminism's about. But when you go back to like Simone de Beauvoir and thinkers like that, like the role of, Simone de Beauvoir said, one is not born a woman, one must become a woman. And what she meant was, you're sort of born into the role. You can be a mother, a nurse, a nun, that's about it. But you can push past that and become more than that, And women have since, we've got women leaders in the world, across various nations. We've got women who are successful in every possible career that imaginable, whether it be lawyers or doctors or surgeons. Like my wife, for instance, her mother was a psychiatrist, a successful woman, but there's heaps of them, But again, there's other areas where you'll find, equal pay in areas where it gets a bit like Hollywood, of course. That's a weird one. They're all getting paid so much money anyway. But there are places where it's, in social, like studies in sort of inside the society, because where women are forced to negotiate with their bosses more to get better pay, whereas men don't have to. It's just assumed that they're better at their job already, so they'll just give them the higher pay rate. And then women
That's
have to go and
because women
negotiate.
are less likely to be like assertive.
Well, that's the point, is that they don't offer it up straight away. They think so.
That's a
There's
difference
habit there.
between two.
Yeah, but it happens with ethnicities in certain countries. If your last name looks, they've done social studies on this where they send the same resumes in, and Glenn Updike gets a call back. Yet Alexandria Medvetsky doesn't, because he's got a foreign name. Or in the case in America, they did it with people who had very particularly African American sounding names, so they wouldn't get a call back even though the resumes were the same. Now, these things happen, of course, and you want to make sure that these are, that this doesn't happen. People should have equal opportunity to go for a job. And I don't know how you battle for that or how it works, but I'd like that was the case, And again, I see a place where, going back to a point you made much earlier, and we probably should sort of finish things with going around in circles, not around circles, but looping back on things, is where education doesn't have a built-in obsolescence. So someone might only do a short part of a degree. You don't know where they're going to end up working, but like you said they might be making sandwiches, then they're paying the manager of that sandwich bar, and they may have just happened to have studied a level of ethics or
Lesbian
sociology
dance theory.
Lesbian dance theory, who knows, and they might have touched on discrimination in that, and they sort of took it with them into their job, saying, I don't want to discriminate against someone who has tattoos or who has a convicted felon and they've served their time in prison, but I want to give them a job anyway. They want to, they might have some other views around that because of their education, rather than carrying a view that they formed when they were a child and has remained unchallenged since. So anyway, I suppose to sum up, if anyone listens to this all the way through, because I was originally thinking we were going to talk for 40 minutes, was that that I think that, the very brief summary is that there are missing, I keep saying, but there are ingredients, there are missing things in society today. There are things that, because we've tried a lot of these things, and in my own lifetime, which has been very short, like short and since I'm 46 this year, but I've seen various governments in this country, and under them, the changes have been very slow and gradual, which it takes time to get certain things through. But we've reached at a certain point where I think that there's obvious ones to me that capitalism can't solve directly. They just won't. You're relying on goodwill to save it, an investment, whereas people don't get to be millionaires and multimillionaires and billionaires and multi-billionaires by being generous with their money. That usually isn't how it happens.
I would argue that, but that could be for a different conversation.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I feel that there is an ingredient there that and I think it comes from a level of maturity. I mean, I really do. I think it's like a type of intellectual, emotional maturity. some sort of sense of recognising there's something bigger than the individual. It's not always just about us, just me and what I need. It's about what other people need. And I don't see that the pursuit of capitalism is about addressing those needs directly, whereas more of a democratic socialism is. It's sort of saying, hey, there's some people who don't have the opportunities that the basic needs and opportunities that should be met for all. They just can't have it. And the thing that's stopping that is lack of funding. And there isn't a shortage of money in the world. It's the flow of that money, the problem. And that's not going to stop rich people being rich. It's just about a mature, what I would say, a majority accepting that level of maturity may be required. But it doesn't mean, I don't mean mature in the sense that people are immature in themselves. I'm talking about a nation maturing to a point saying, hey, we've been doing this, and it's got us some amazing things so far. And now we've got also a lot of things that's left behind. How can we correct that now? You know, we've got a lot of marvellous things, but we've got this sort of, it's also created a lot of other problems that we've largely ignored or neglected or not wanted to address, and believing it would just go away and self-correct without any help. But I don't think that's the case. And I don't see that the current forms of government, in the form of its capitalist sense, is going to address that. That's just how that's my opinion.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, mate. Yeah, well, good chatting, Glenn. I look forward to your next program. Who's on next? We've got some other people in the arcade industry and other friends that we've got to know and elsewhere and stuff.
Well, next would be John Klinkle.
Oh, well, he's a very contrite. He'll disagree with everything I probably said. So.
Yeah, he probably would. I've disagreed with a lot of what you said tonight, but
that's fine. It's like that old saying. I mean, it's quoted by Voltaire. There was a woman who said it. It was actually a woman who said it. I don't remember the name. I don't think I ever knew the name. But it was a woman who said, I don't agree with you, but I'll fight for your right to the death to let you. How's it go? I don't
agree with you, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it.
Yeah, that's it. And it's quoted to be Voltaire, but it was actually a woman who said it. So
which has been my whole philosophy. Even though I don't, I'm at least willing to have a conversation and actually listen to people.
Yeah, it's not. The finding the disagreement's important. That's where conversation can happen. And I'm not. It's just an opinion in the end. It's just one vote. In your country, it's either one more vote or not even a vote. There's no compulsory voting. So, that's all it is. Talk about these things forever and ultimately just casting a vote.
Yeah.
All right, mate. Thanks for having me for the chat. That's good, Glenn. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Bye.